Right.
combined. They did this on their own without the usual staff of gazillions of residents of Krishna Loka. They wanted to, Krishna wanted to see what Radharani, what was like to be the originator of the things that she says to him, because when she says something to him, he appreciates, but by the time he's appreciated, she's a step beyond him again. So he wanted to take an incarnation as Radharani. So that's why he's a golden color.
Okay.
So insofar as being Krishna, it works this way. Starting in Krishna Loka, Krishna's first expansion is his brother Balaram, Baladev. Right? And Baladev is then the source of the first four Vishnus.
Right.
And they're distinguished by the order in which the weapons and emblems are in their hands. And after that comes the next layers of Vishnu, like Mahavishnu, who is the creator of all the universes by breathing out bubbles. In those bubbles become universes. So there's unlimited universes with unlimited Brahmas in charge of them, with unlimited suckers like us in them, suffering in the darkness.
Hmm.
All right. That was just a question. I read the what is it, the Topanga meeting the other day.
Ah,
Yeah.
Topanga conversation with Srila
Yeah.
Prabhupada, with Tamal Krishna.
Yeah. Narayana is mentioned at the end by the devotee that's inquiring.
Yes. I mentioned that to Narayan Prabhu.
Yeah.
Two personalities are mentioned. Narayan Prabhu is mentioned, and Yashoda, his best friend.
Oh.
Who's
I
best friend?
I thought there was one other devotee as well.
Narayan Prabhu's.
Whose best friend is Yasoda?
I said Narayan's best friend.
I don't have any best friends.
It's just a joke, Prabhu. Anyways,
I am by nature and by limitation equal to everyone.
Jai.
That's the nature. That happens also to be the nature of the soul, to be equal to everyone. Because we're equal to every jiva, because every jiva is equally part and parcel of Krishna as we are.
Jai. So that Topanga conversation that you read, very detailed reading with Hansadura.
Yeah.
And now Narayan Prabhu has talked about that before, where Tamal Krishna. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I was listening to one, and the point that at the end that Narayana Prabhu had made was, after the disclosure of all of this, there was really no intention on doing anything about it. That's what I believe. That's what Prabhu said. Correct me if I'm wrong.
What are we talking about?
The Topanga conversation that happened in 1980 or something.
Oh, the Topanga. Yes.
Yeah.
Damage control.
It was damage control.
Pure damage control.
Yeah.
He had been kicked out by the GBC,
right.
And he didn't have anywhere to go except out. And what could he do? Become a Babaji somewhere in a hut? No, so he joined the opposite side. Because he needed a group. He needed people to support him and to believe in what he was doing.
Yeah.
So he gave them enough bait to make them want to deal with him overall. And by dealing with making the statements he did in Topanga, he completely scared the you-know-what out of the GBC and the other gurus. Because he was exposing the whole thing.
Yeah.
He said, you guys want to kick me out? Well, I'll tell it like it is. I'll tell the story the way it really occurred. And so they immediately made measures to get him back in. And then, of course, his telling stories like that ceased, and anything he said at Topanga was taken just to be philosophical or something like that, just something that you can brush off the table like a crumb. So if we're looking for genuineness and you see, you think if these people are all devotees, then let's see what part of them is being genuine disciple of Prabhupada.
Right, right.
Unfortunately, by that time, after they had worked to poison Prabhupada, the representing Prabhupada had no longer was no longer an issue. If you want to represent Prabhupada, well, there's a very good way to do it. Give class from the Bhagavad Gita or the Srimad Bhagavatam. You can talk about Prabhupada's philosophy, but meanwhile, what do? Talk to each other behind closed doors? You work deals. And that has nothing to do with what we call bhakti. It has a great deal to do. I don't know, Prabhu, if you were from the Catholic Church, but the Catholic Church has been doing that for 2,000 years. They've been building structures behind the scenes by which they run the entire church, and then the congregation comes in googly-eyed and wide-eyed and smiling and tears in the eyes to be saved.
Right.
And they have already worked out what they want. And the main thing is, as long as the audience thinks they're saved, the congregation thinks they're saved, they'll give money. They'll support it. They'll build a new building. They'll do all the things that any organization wants for themselves. But what is really driving it? Is it some sort of mystical vision of Jesus? Is it some sort of an overwhelming desire to represent Jesus as he spoke himself? They don't even come within a million miles of that idea. Let Jesus be Jesus. He's the Son of God. He died. He went back, and he's going to save you all. But don't bother us with his ideas because they're too difficult to incorporate into human society. So they did the same thing with Prabhupada. Actually, in 1970, they gave up. They were given the direction of management, which we could say is a divine gift from Krishna through Srila Prabhupada. And actually through Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur as well, because Bhaktisiddhanta also created a governing body commission. And all Prabhupada did was repeat his spiritual master's desire that the society should be based on election-based temples whereby they can have governing body members for 3 years and then they go back to their temple. And in that way they enrich the temple president so much, not with money, but enrich him spiritually because can you imagine you're a temple president, you rented an apartment, you got some people into it, then you rented a house, then you bought a house, then you started remodeling it, turning it into a temple, and then you become a GBC. You go out for 3 years and your eyes get as big as dinner plates. You're looking all around. Oh my God,
right.
To see what can be done. And I'm part of these 10 temples. I'm working with these 10 temples, part of these 10 temples, helping them organize. Just wait till I get back after my 3-year term as GBC to my temple. What will I be able to do is hold on to your hat. You'll see, it'll be amazing. That's what Prabhupada wanted. That is what Prabhupada wanted.
When did
They wanted isolated power, practically identical to the hierarchical structure of the Vatican. And Prabhupada never wanted that. He even specifically said that in 1968 in Seattle. A reporter lady asked him, "Oh, when you're gone," or whatever she said more politely than that, I suppose. But after your time is over, or whatever, do you want your disciples to create a structure like the Catholic Church? She was very specific, Catholic Church. And Prabhupada said, no, we do not want a hierarchical structure. We don't want a structure that depends on authority from above coming down to the different devotees in different temples. We want it all from the bottom up. That's 1968. That's 2 years before he created the direction of management. He never, ever wanted a power structure as ISKCON. And the fact that we have one is very bad. It's also very good because whatever it is they're doing, they're keeping the temple doors open, the deities are being fed opulent prasadam, boga, and it turns into prasadam, and when they tasted it, and then the kirtans are going on, really creepy sounding kirtans, but kirtans nonetheless. The arti ceremony is going on, the worship is going on, they buy incense and offer it to the deities. I mean, that's all wonderful, but it's not enough to fulfill Prabhupada's mission. Prabhupada is a mission, and his mission would have been to a large degree fulfilled by the GBC being elected every 3 years. Like you elect, if there's 20 to 30 temples, you put up 30 candidates on a ballot, and then they vote for them. And out of the ones they vote for, or maybe vote and then re-vote when it makes a smaller group, you end up with 11 or 12, was it? 11?
12,
GBCs.
12.
12 GBCs, 11 RIFICs, 12 GBCs. So you end up with 12 GBCs for 3-year time. Of those 3-year spans, 4 of the GBCs remain for a second tour, and the other 8 go back to their temples if they're not reelected, which is another can of worms. I mean, can you elect them perpetually? Well, if all the temples want to, you could, but if the temples don't want to, then you don't. You can't. You can only do what the temples want, not what they want. So when Prabhupada created the GBC like that, why 4 stayed over? Well, somebody has to know where the pencils are in the drawer and where the fax machine's paper is and stuff like that. I'm just kidding. But they have somebody has to know what you've been doing. Otherwise, it's just raw. So the 4 started clue in the new 8, and the new 8, assuming that none of the 8 are reelected, the new 8 then are given a clue, and then those 4 leave after 3 years, and another 4 stay to keep an eye on things. The whole structure is, the whole idea is, we don't want professionals. We don't want experts. We don't want gurus, for God's sake. Literally, for God's sake, we don't want gurus. What we do want is amateurs becoming expert.
Right.
Expert amateurs. So the temple president is not a congressman, he's not a senator, he's not a Supreme Court judge, he's not president or vice president. Thank God he's not Nancy Pelosi. All of these personalities are there, and they're learning, but they're learning as feet on the ground people, not Shudras, not peasants, but leaders of a temple. Let's say either they created the temple themselves, or somebody created the temple, or a group created the temple, and he was elected or the temple president. If he created the temple himself with his own money, there's no reason why he shouldn't be the temple president. It's not like he invites a bunch of people and they vote him out of the presidency.
Yeah,
He's temple
something.
president.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Some people have experienced that, but they haven't.
Me?
So that's not the process. The process is that if the temple is made by a bunch of people, then the people can elect their temple president. If the temple was made in somebody's living room, well, you're not going to take their living room away from them. So they continue like that. If it gets bigger, if they want to create a big congregation, if the congregation wants to elect a temple president in a building that is now incorporated as ISKCON, yes, why not? Then the person is no longer the sole proprietor temple president. It was designed impeccably. Prabhupada's design was impeccable. There's no flaw in it, even slightly. The flaws were not introduced by Prabhupada. The only flaw was the GBC refused to accept it.
Okay. Everything got thrown to the wind in 78.
No,
Well,
much before that.
how about in 71? In
Yeah.
1970, Prabhupada created the GBC. 71, 72, 73, 74, there should have been an election. They refused.
Oh, okay.
See, they never had even one election. Then they went to the temples and said to everyone who is, and not a single soul in ISKCON except the GBC and a few temple presidents had seen the direction of management that Prabhupada created, that they all read, they all signed, and they all became the original 12 GBC. They didn't share that with anyone.
Mm-hmm.
In 71, I was in 71, I was in New Vrindavan. No, it must have been 71, spring. So I was in New Vrindavan, and that was when the Prabhupada is God crew created a nightmare for everyone in ISKCON.
Right. That's another story.
Before sannyasis, that's a different story. But they had the first GBC meeting there. And the GBC sort of like hung out in a former pigsty made of logs. And it was nice inside. There were no pigs and no pig manure. But it was a former pigsty. And they were in there. They had big tables and stuff. And they kept on having meetings. Strictly speaking, the GBC should have been out talking with the devotees, explaining about the direction of management. Instead, Rupanuga Prabhu, with whom I had a mixed sort of relationship, he invited me in. He said, "Narayan, this is your sort of thing." Why? Because I have a background in psychology. I have a degree in English literature, a background in psychology. Rupanuga was a social worker, so he didn't need that type of education.
Right.
But I had a very broad liberal education. And I had read, simply because we had no television and very little radio, and only a gramophone that played 78 records, that I had read I was raised on a farm in the middle of nowhere, 5 miles from the nearest town. All we had was a Model A Ford to get to town, and we only went to town infrequently. And I was homeschooled until I was 10. So until I was 10, I read voraciously. I was reading adult books at the age of 8, and I kept on going. Nothing else to do. My brother wasn't that much fun, and so he didn't like to read at all. So and we didn't discuss books. So I just read and read and read and read.
Right.
So by the time I got into college, it became a habit. So high school, I read like grammar school. I read at 4th grade onward. I read like crazy. High school, I read like crazy. Then college. By the time I went to college, I had read as much literature, more probably than most of my professors.
Wow.
Because they'd gone through and studied what they needed to study without reading a huge number of other books. I read anything I could get my hands on. I'm talking about classic literature like Charles Dickens,
Gosh.
all of the known, mostly 19th century, 18th, 19th century writers. I didn't even get into 20th century writing or the contemporary writing, which by then was like books like 1984. I didn't get into those until I was 13. And
Wow.
it terrified the hell out of me. I didn't imagine that people would write books or have topics like that to discuss.
Okay, right.
So now, yeah, I went off on a bender, didn't I? So now where do we need to go?
Yeah, I wanted to bring it back. So you were talking about Rupa Nuga showing you a document, which was a secret document, according to your
Well, according to
our
Rupa
previous.
Nuga.
Yeah,
And
according,
not only he showed it to me, he brought me in and showed it to me without asking his fellow GBC members. They were all in there in a clump, like a club, like a cult, a club of their own.
right.
And the whole idea was that they weren't very keen on me reading it.
Ah,
And then
right.
Rupanuga was smiling his Rupanuga smile, saying, "Oh, this is a top secret document."
Wow.
And I
So
said,
this,
I read it, and I read it. It's only 4 pages, and I had an English literature background to be able to grasp the majority of everything that was written there. But
right.
what I couldn't understand was if it's meant for the governance of ISKCON, then why is it top secret?
Right, right. If the local people are going to pick the GBC, then what's the secret about it, right?
Well, so I asked Rupanuga that. He said, well, Prabhupada hasn't decided when or how to release it yet.
What?
Well, I had no choice but to believe it. He said GBC.
Right. Wow.
I assumed that he was representing Prabhupada. And it may be that Prabhupada had not made a very strong decision when to release it to the public. Because if he had, that could have created a nightmare.
Right. It would make the local devotees or the presidents in charge of the local centers and the congregation would have had a lot more power to
And the
overhaul.
question is maybe too much power.
Yeah.
In other words, it could have split the society apart a bit.
Right.
We don't
right,
know.
because,
We don't know.
Right. It could have, because if someone was up to no good, the local congregation members could have booted the GBC out, or
Well,
or till the
maybe.
next.
Basically, back then, people were only in the infancy of doing bad things.
Infancy of doing bad things.
Yeah, it's before. I mean, the worst thing they did was conspire to poison Prabhupada by
Right.
coming across with the notion that he was senile.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Which he clearly was not. If you ever look at the tapes of Prabhupada's translating, at the very end, like days before he entered Samadhi,
Right.
if you look at the those tapes, he was lying there, unable to speak. He just basically was croaking. It's like croaking and whispering at the same time, meaning whispering with his lips and croaking with his throat, because he couldn't really form words. His kidneys had ceased to function for an entire month before he left. So anyone who said he was senile, let them be able to write the purports to the 10th canto without any kidney, without his, with no kidney function whatsoever. It's impossible.
Right.
Yeah.
Materially, technically, on the material level, it's impossible. And Prabhupada proved he wasn't senile by doing it. he didn't do. Krishna did. Krishna was using his body as a puppet, and Krishna was speaking through his lips. Krishna was designing the purports that became the Bhaktivedanta purports.
Right.
But if anyone, what we're doing is opening the door to inquiry, right?
Right.
We're opening the door to inquiring into the history of ISKCON as it is, the real history of ISKCON. So when we have on one side Tamal and Shamar openly declaring that Prabhupada is senile, and then we have Prabhupada translating up until his last breath without any kidney function, then we have a picture that whoever said he was senile was absolutely crazy or ill-motivated, or both.
Right. So we have Vishnu Tejas Prabhu here coming on. So
Hare Krishna.
Krishna Tejas,
Hare Krishna.
welcome.
Hare
Jai
Krishna.
Prabhu.
Yeah.
Oh,
Ramachandra, forgot to
Yes,
tell you, your disciples are stupid.
yeah. You know my disciples are stupid.
they remind me of me.
They remind you of you?
Yeah.
Oh, you saw the video, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting. Those children, they were from the Christian. What background they were from? Christians? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And when I talked about the soul, they understood it. Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah,
But they didn't know what it was until then.
yeah,
Children have no difficulty understanding the soul because a child has no firmly established brain function.
Mm.
He's starting from consciousness, and he's adding vocabulary, adding perception, adding the ability even just to distinguish form by seeing. When you're a little baby, you cannot distinguish, even see form. You just lie there, your eyes are open, but you can't see form as adults do.
Yeah,
So
they were 15 years old.
how long? How old?
15 and 16, I think.
Okay, well, at that point, they are still capable of direct perception.
Yeah. There was some direct perception at the end.
Yeah. Now, puberty clouds the whole thing a lot because one immediately becomes in the mode of the hunter and the huntress out prowling for a mate.
Right.
And that is a preoccupation of the mammal. And as long as you have a material body, there's absolutely no way to escape the implication of the predator prowling instinct of the male for the female and the female for the male.
Right.
But by Krishna consciousness, we can separate the man and woman's mammalian instincts and proclivities and, shall we say, racial and cultural species, necessity of the species to reproduce. The species must reproduce, and from the Darwinian point of view, that the species tries to, the dominant male wants to capture the dominant female. And even more so, the dominant female wants to capture the dominant male. How does she do it? She buys billions and billions of dollars worth of makeup. Not one woman, but all of them together. Think how much makeup is being purchased by how many women just so that they will become the dominant female in the eyes of the male that they want to reproduce with. You know, things are getting so mixed up that people forget even what gender they are. But if you look at people specifically and only from the mammalian point of view, then they must reproduce, and they must reproduce with the dominant male with the dominant female, or they failed their species. Now that has nothing to do with spiritual life, because we have to say that whole process of male, female, etc., is asat. the male and the female and the male. It's asat. It is pulling, using the divine energy in your consciousness, your conscious energy, to filter through mind and body to attract the opposite sex. So when we do that, it's very hard to become Krishna conscious. And that's why a brahmachari is supposed to go through the Gurukula and then stay brahmachari until 25 years old. And then he marries a girl, maybe 15 or 16 years old, about 10 years younger than he is. And that gives him an advantage to stay Krishna conscious while reproducing. Does that make sense?
Kind of.
I can't.
The end part took me a little bit there.
Explain.
The age difference, so that he's more advanced and they're not going through the same trials and tribulations of puberty.
Well, they don't anyhow. I mean, just think of it. Just look out on the sidewalk. You'll see women out there. They're ready for a BMW, for a house. They reach puberty. As soon as a female reaches puberty, they, in spite of whatever psychologists can come up with, a female that reaches puberty is ready to reproduce. Do we agree on that point?
Right.
Maybe not emotionally, psychologically, or financially.
Right.
But
physically,
yes, she's ready to reproduce. What is going through her mind as she thinks about, oh, that is a cute boy over there. Well, she's thinking of the cute boy. She's thinking, what would it be like to live with him? What would our furniture be like? What would our bedroom be like? What would our car be like? Would we have a Keurig coffee maker or a regular coffee maker? I mean, this is what she's thinking. She's ready for that, and she's ready for the car with a car seat in the back for the baby.
Yeah.
And what is the guy, she'd say he's 16, 17, what is the guy ready for?
Of the same age?
Yeah, the 16-year-old girl is ready for the car and the house and the baby seat in the car.
No, the man wants the woman wants the baby.
Yeah, but what is the man ready for in terms of providing the house, the Keurig coffee maker, the BMW, the furniture at the age of 17? What's he ready for?
At the age of 17?
You know what just look out the window. He is ready for a skateboard. Right?
Or some expensive video game these kids are on these days, yeah?
Yeah, well, that too, But let's just say physically out there, he's ready for, he'd love to have sex, he probably is having sex with the girl that wishes that she had a house and a child and a car. But and that's because it's all twisted up. But he's not ready for a car. He's ready for a skateboard. And a skateboard is exact symbol of, I'm mature enough to have sex, but I'm not mature enough to earn an income and support a wife. Because nobody on a skateboard is going to support a wife. Well, they do also, but I mean, I'm talking in general, in principle. So if the man is 25, he's put his skateboard in the closet, he's already bought his BMW, he has his degree in college or whatever it is, and he's ready to go. And the girl, if she's 16, 17 years old, she thinks, wow, this is a dream come true. My husband has already got all sorts of stuff that I have been dreaming about, like furniture, like a car. I'm just using our modern stuff. In the Vedic times, it was much different. But the principle is the same. The guy, it was young. The young men were not riding skateboards back then. They were in Gurukula studying Shastra and becoming purified. So that when they became, and educated, so that when they became 25, they could go into their father's business And if they had 4 or 5 sons, they go into the father's business, build it even bigger, make it really wonderful, get married. The women have a wonderful time, having all the necessities of life provided. And then the children come along and they're raised up in that same mood, so that you can have a huge dynasty of business if you make it work in that process. But it doesn't work if the 18-year-old boy and girl get married, or if the girl waits till she's 25 and he's 25, they get married. By that time, she's practically burnt out. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, look at the women at 25 years old. Quite frankly, a woman, from the fertility point of view, is at her best when she reaches a year or two after puberty, if not at puberty. She's at her best. She's fresh, she's ready, she's got everything all lined up for reproduction. And then she's told, no, you have to wait 10 or 15 or even 20 years before you get married. What an insane system, eh? What do you think?
Well, from Western point of view, this is like incomprehensible to anyone. You know what I mean? Varnashram, anything like this.
Oh, it's incomprehensible?
No, I mean like to the average American, to the skateboard guy.
Well, the skateboard guy who's, when he's not skateboarding, as you point out, is watching high-tech video games, you know, is it working? Is this skateboard guy and 17-year-old girl working? Is it working to produce the society that we require?
No.
And not just talking physically and materially and genetically, reproductively and mammalianly, is it working? I mean, it's anti-mammalian. And then what about spiritually? What's the 17-year-old guy going to do with his 17-year-old wife? Spiritually. He's clueless. This is when his brain has finally reached the point where it can be developed. And he can develop his brain in the Gurukula with a teacher who is, if not a pure devotee like Prabhupada or Sandipani Muni, at least so highly advanced that the student becomes incredibly disciplined within the spirit of his spiritual life. That's there in the Jewish tradition. It's called the yeshiva. No pun on the word shiva, I would imagine. But the Jews in the yeshiva, they study all the biblical texts. Not just like the Christians where they read it and say, do you believe it or not? If you don't believe it, go sit in the corner. If you do believe it, just say you believe it, you know?
Yeah.
That's not the point. In the yeshiva, you discuss every little bit and piece of the scriptures, Jewish scriptures in Hebrew, Aramaic, Chaldaic. You discuss the Kabbalah, all of that stuff until you reach marriage age. So they get essentially the Jewish, non-vegetarian Jewish equivalent of a Gurukula education. But the non-Jews that's why Jews are so good at law and stuff like that. They're used to being able to pick ideas into pieces by picking the scriptures into pieces. And they can't just pick it into pieces. They have to be able to come up with the right answer from an intricacy of multi-layered intelligence on the scripture. And that's essentially what devotees can do also. They can go into the Shastra and see, like the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's like dozens of layers. And if they go into those layers and start puzzling them out, it'll be greatly to their credit to do so.
Right.
But instead, you know, they don't bother. They just
They surrender.
It and say, I read it. They say, I read it. Now what? Now what do I do? Maybe I could go to the movies.
You know, I want to bring it back to the 17-year-old. When I was 20 or 22 or 23 or 24, I was racing cars.
You were racing cars?
Yes, I was racing cars. 18, 19, 20,
Like
Really?
21.
Where
Fast
were
and
you
the
racing?
Furious?
Where,
I was
where were you racing them?
street racing. What else?
Oh,
Okay.
street racing. Oh my God.
Yeah,
You mean illegal
Mama
racing, right?
Chandra.
yeah, illegal, illegal street racing.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Where was that? In Fiji?
No, in Sacramento. Where else can do it in Fiji?
In where?
In Sacramento. In Sacramento.
You were that young in Sacramento.
Yeah, I
How
came
old?
when I was in sixth grade to America.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And the first thing you did was get a race car.
No, no. Yeah, when I was 20 or something, I had a race car or something like that.
This is amazing. So,
So
so
you
this
were
is
saying
like a,
skateboard. So
is
when you were
well,
saying the skateboard, I was in a car, I was not
yeah,
thinking about. So that makes
skateboard.
sense. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
but you
kind of
can
skateboard
see,
for me.
but the mentality is the same, no?
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
It's testosterone.
Yeah.
So you racing street racing in cars was like a skateboard on steroids.
Right, basically. Then
The
when I
same idea. But you
right.
see, the skateboard has made it so easy that anyone with a few bucks can buy a secondhand skateboard, and next thing you know, he's one of the crew. Whereas to race a car, you have to put thousands of dollars into it, right?
Yes, that's what I did. I wasted a lot of money.
Not wasted. You spend a lot of money. I mean,
Yes.
there's no waste in becoming an expert, you know. So you did
Well, I
your own
was the
mechanic.
expert.
Did
Yes.
you soup your cars up a lot?
Yeah, that's what I did. I did myself, so I saved a lot of money. And
So what did you do to? What sort of cars did you race?
well, I had a Honda Civic with a 210 horsepower engine. The Honda Civic weighed about 1,900 pounds, and it had a 210 horsepower engine. So just imagine, it can fly. Basically, it was like
Yeah.
crazy
So
fast.
that was not the factory engine.
No, it was not.
What engine was? Where did you get the engine?
Uh, it was from a Acura, which was much heavier and much more beefy. You know.
Yeah, it's sort of
Oh
a
yeah,
medium-sized
the
car.
Honda Acura's the same cars.
Yeah. So the engine was totally rebuilt for racing, and so that's what I was doing.
Yeah, but how did you hook up the linkage? How did you hook the engine to the transmission, etc.?
Oh yeah, it was a manual transmission, so everything was just a bolt on, and I figured out the wiring. The wiring was the hard part of it, the computer. So the
Yeah.
computer bolted in, and everything worked fine. I had the AC, all the electronics was hooked up. It was a very simple car. So in that sense, just had to from
Well,
two injectors. So
most stock car racing are very simple cars. They don't even have any much upholstery. They don't have any
yeah,
what you
yeah,
call it padding on the doors or ceiling. It's just a shell with a very powerful engine
that's it. That's what I was doing.
and a very gutsy driver.
And I think when I got married, I still had one of those cars. I think I sold it maybe after 2-3 years after I got married.
Really.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
was your car street legal?
Yeah, I had everything street legally done. It had a catalytic converter. It passed the California emissions. So if the police pulled me over and they'd be like, "Hey, this engine doesn't belong in this car," I'll be like, "Yes, it does. I got it certified. You cannot give me $1,000 ticket."
He gave you $1,000 ticket.
They could have given you $1,000 ticket if it was not certified for the with the state of California, meaning that
So
it has to.
how did you get it certified, or did
Well, you
you?
have to. Yeah, you have to put on the catalytic converter, the wiring, and everything that was on the newer car to the uh, Honda Civic. Basically, you had to make sure all the wiring and everything was up to par of the
So was the
computer.
transmission from the bigger car or from the Civic.
Bigger car, of course, bigger car. Everything had to match the engine.
And the was it front wheel drive?
Front wheel drive, right? Front
So
wheel
you
drive.
didn't have to worry about the rear end or anything like that.
No, nothing like that. Very simple.
So it's just an engine, a transmission, and wheels.
Wheels and the computer. Yes.
The computer, yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. Too bad you sold it.
Yeah, I sold it, and it was something that I learned a lot from. So.
And, how many did you ever make more than one?
Oh yeah, 3 or 4.
Oh, that's amazing. Which was the last one the best one?
Yeah, the last one was like a 300 horsepower turbocharged Honda Civic.
Ridiculous.
No,
Yeah.
that was that a factory engine?
No, nothing factory. Nothing factory.
So how did
Engine
you get it certified?
Oh, my last one was not certified.
I was gonna say that's what the ticket's for.
Yeah, my last one was not certified.
Stop you rascals.
Yeah,
Did you ever get a ticket?
Well, I didn't get a ticket, but I rolled the car a couple of times.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I nearly died. So.
Jeez.
Well, it just shows you that your time had not come.
Exactly.
Sacramento drift.
Yeah, I rolled the car into a tree and I knocked down the tree.
Hare Krishna.
And I came out with a broken hand and a cut ear and a busted forehead. So it wasn't my time, like Narayana Prabhu said.
That's nothing compared to what it could have been.
That's not even close.
I knew people in college that were in motorcycle accidents.
Right.
For some reason, he got into like 10 motorcycle accidents. Each time it nearly killed him. So when I knew him in college, he was perpetually on crutches and braces and stuff like that. He could barely walk.
Wow.
Rake Krishna Marike, Mare Krishna Rakeke.
Yeah.
Anyhow, how did we get off on that? So,
anyways, my skateboard.
Well, I was just saying, like, wait, what?
So
that was my skateboard for several
yeah,
years.
it was just that's why we were on skateboards. So, just out of curiosity, what sort of streets could you race on?
Highways, industrial places, like you're outside your window, like that, for those places.
Yeah. Well, that's totally amazing.
Right. Industrial places usually.
Industrial? Well, they're not very big, are they?
No, they used to have long stretches, right? Industrial places, they have long straight stretches.
Oh, you mean industrial districts with lots of factories on the other side?
Yes.
And that you'll be on the main road, not on the industrial property.
Yes, on the main road.
And it's a place where cops don't tend to hang out because there's no reason for them to hang out there.
No, the cops used to come and we used to run away from the cops. That was part of the
You escaped from the cops?
Yeah, we used to run away from the cops.
Your cars were faster than their cars.
Yeah, there used to be 200-300 people gathering and maybe 10 cops. So, who will the cops catch,
So the cops were okay with you as long as nothing bad happened?
Yeah. As long as nothing crazy happens. But anyways, I think we should shift the gears.
Oh, yeah.
I was just saying, like, on that point, I remember I was in like 6th grade and we had like an AIDS presentation and this girl in my class asked, so the only way to not get AIDS is to not have sex? And the presenter was like, yeah. And then she was like, oh, I can't do that. And this was in like 6th grade. I was like 12 or 13.
Oh, wow. Oh,
I don't
yeah.
know how old she was.
Wow. Yeah. So Narayana Prabhu's point that the women mature or, early. That's very.
So again, I hope you catch the point because it's a Vedic point. I don't know how old Prabhupada was when he got married, but he was in his 20s. And
22.
His wife was what?
He was 22.
22, and his wife was 13.
Wow.
That was typical of higher. He came from a high-class Bengali family.
Mm-hmm.
Malik. Malik is a
Yeah.
title. It's a Muslim title,
big.
but it's Maliks were highly recognized in government, and they got the title Malik if they were. So he came from that category.
You know, that's a very good system. I mean, if I were to get married at 22, and then my wife was 13 or 14 or 15 when she gave birth, then my children would be at least 10, 12 years old by now. And you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly, and
And
it's a very nice thing. And what I came up with is that all the people say, well, how does the woman get a college education? So when you redesign the high school education so that she basically graduates from high school at 16 instead of 18,
right,
she gets married, has kids. By the time her son's 10 years old, she's 25 or 26. He doesn't want to hang out with his mom anyhow. He wants to hang out with his dad and his friends because he's 10 years
Right.
old.
right,
Then she goes to college, gets her 4-year degree, 30 years old, PhD, 34 years old,
right,
and then she will be at 34, 40 to 40 years old. At 40, that's when a woman reaches her most productive years in terms of career. So
right, right.
she not only doesn't lose anything, she gains everything. And by the
Right.
time she gets her PhD, her son is like 20 or
Right,
25,
right,
ready for marriage himself.
right.
So you can imagine what a dynamic family situation that would be.
Amazing situation. Right.
And everybody's youthful. I did not experience that. My mother was almost 40 when I was born, and my dad was 50 when I was born.
Uh-huh.
So I was really raised by elderly people. And all my dad's friends were Europeans from Poland, Jewish people that came over, immigrants, and a lot of them after the war. And as a result, all I met was people in their 60s and 70s growing up. I didn't know any young people,
Right.
except in my hometown, but there were a bunch of yokels, And then they, yeah. So, and then my mother's relatives, back then when my mother was 40 and I was born, 42 when my brother was born,
Wow.
The women back then did not bleach their hair and try to dye their hair and look young. What they did was they all wanted to look old, because only old women in their 40s were yearning to be in their 50s and 60s, because that's when women had power and respect in society. I don't mean government. I don't mean business. I don't mean government. But in the home-based, supposing you have a farming community and there's about 10 farms all around you, and you get together to have a big beef festival or a quilting bee or something of that sort, making quilts, and everybody sits there jabbering away at what to do. The ones that are older are the ones that get the respect. The ones that are younger are treated like yokels. They're just kids. So the women always wanted to be older, not younger.
So a question in
Yeah.
your family background, the Jewish or whatever background you want to call it, the women used to get married late, or what was the deal, or was it a Vedic system
No.
or part of the Vedic system?
Vedic.
It was, well, I think the Jewish culture came from the Vedic system. But I never took part in anything with young people and Jews, because all the Jews that were young in my school hid the fact that they were Jewish, because we were in a very prejudiced town, and it's a Semitic town. So I didn't find out until years later, like when I was in college, how many Jewish, not many, half a dozen at the most Jewish kids were in the school. And I was very conspicuously Jewish. They never identified themselves. But it was only when I got to be like 13, I began dating a Jewish girl that was the same age. I was 14, she was 12 or 13. And it was very nice. She was a very nice girl, wonderful girl, no sex, just wonderful person. And the so to give an example of my father was from a very wealthy family. His family, the Zackheim family, owned 7 city blocks of Warsaw. And we're not talking about little tiny American blocks. We're talking about blocks that are like 10 blocks.
Acha,
10 blocks by 10 blocks, American style. So it's a huge chunk, a huge bunch of land and buildings mostly, and people that were tenants, and industries and businesses and stuff like that they also either owned or rented out space for people to have.
This was in America, or where?
This was in Poland, in Warsaw, Poland. So when my grandfather got married, his first marriage, his wife died when he was 43. Because women back then, they used to say, for every child, a tooth, because the women didn't know anything about nutrition. So every time they had a child, it used up all the calcium in their body. And they died young. So if my grandmother was, she was probably at least 10 or 20, maybe 10 or 15 years younger than he was. She died when he was 43. Then he married another girl. She was from a very high-level Jewish family, priestly family.
Right.
The 12 tribes of Israel. She was from the Kohanim, which means the priestly class of Jews, of the ecclesiastics, highly educated ecclesiastics. But she was from a poor family.
So they're like smart, the Brahmin is?
Yeah, exactly like the Brahmins.
Sorry.
And she was from a poor family. So when she was 18, she married my grandfather, who was 43.
Ah, interesting.
So that distance was there. Her advantage was that she got to marry into a very wealthy family, very powerful, wealthy family. And and when my grandfather died, I think he was hardly 60 when he died, she took over the whole family and ran the whole thing with an iron hand, even though she was only 4 foot, 10 foot tall.
Wow. Right.
So that's my own family experience with youthful marriage. So generally, girls married young. The Jewish girls married young for the obvious reason that that's when they're fertile. Why would they wait 10 years being fertile to get married? That only came with college education, and college education only came with high school education, which came in the 1920s and 30s after the Depression. They sent all the kids to school because there were no jobs in the United States.
Right.
So all the kids went to school. And that's where this whole obsession with getting a college education came from. Nobody needed one, but they had no jobs, so they went to school, and the government paid, of course. So that's where it all happened. And so as soon as the girls started competing in school, well, they couldn't get their PhD until they're 30 years old. So how can you get married before then?
Yeah, that's
or they would get married, but their husband and wife would struggle along trying to make a living with little part-time jobs so that they could both finish school together.
There was this devotee that remember I said was looking for a wife, and you made that point that even though he might be a qualified devotee, but these people in India, they want the husband to be very educated.
Well, educated and well connected.
Yeah, educated and well connected.
Like if a girl is in India, her father is probably, and she's, a suitable wife, she's not a Shudra. If she's a Shudrani, that would mean that she's from a poor family, maybe vegetarian, maybe not be vegetarian. You know what I mean? It's just like a lower class. So if he wants to marry a lower class Indian girl, he should be able to put an ad in the Indian newspaper, get someone to translate English into Hindi, he could probably get 1,000 marriage proposals within a week or so from
Right.
girls that can't marry well in India.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Right. Right.
So, but if girls in India want to marry as high as they can, either within
Yeah.
their own caste or in a higher one, but
Right.
mainly they just want to be well situated. So what does a girl want in India? She wants to marry a guy who's probably a medium-aged son out of 5 or 10 sons, and well connected in the family business, knows how to make a living, is quite capable of including her in the family structure, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, so if she's going to marry an American, well, women are willing to put down many of their standards just to marry an American. And of course, if he's into IT, that's another story altogether. Because
Right.
if he's in IT working in Silicon Valley, then he can marry. But then he can get the pick of, they pick a girl who's in IT as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the real question boils down to this devotee, what is his qualification?
Right. Right.
What is his family connection? It's not like he's got a skateboard and wants to get married. That's an idea, you see. But he sounds almost as though he's next door to having a skateboard and wanting to get married.
He does have a car.
He doesn't?
He does have a car.
Well, that's nice.
And then,
But what size engine does it have?
anyways, I didn't ask about the engine, but yeah.
So
Something
you
to
get the
consider.
point. You get the
Yeah,
point.
I do get the point. Yes. Yes.
It's a
It's very hard.
simple point.
Yes. Very simple point. Right.
Yeah. So once he's got something going for him, because how, unless he's from a very wealthy family, how is he going to support his wife?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, now I want to go to college and I want my wife to get a job in the department store. Well, how good is that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Why does he
Right.
want to come from India to America to work as a clerk in a department store
Right. Right.
if she's from a good family?
Mm.
Of course, that's the general rule, and it's the general rule that was present for up until IT,
Mm.
you know. But now, Indian girls are ready to become adventurous and do crazy stuff just like Americans do. And maybe
Right.
some crazy Indian woman. But then again, if she's a crazy Indian woman, she may not end up being such a good wife.
Right. Right. You're right.
Have I got enough light on me, or should I have more light?
You cannot see your face.
Oh, well, that's some people would call that an advantage. Yeah,
You're
when
like
you
a
put
ghost.
Yeah, it's mysterious. It's got a mysterious. You got the.
You got the shadows.
I'll turn on this
You're
light
in
and see the
between
mix of
dimensions.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I keep
There you go.
forgetting which lights I usually have.
Uh-huh.
I
Anyways,
gave,
anyone
oh
have?
yeah, this is pretty good. Now we're balanced, right?
Right, we're all balanced now.
Okay, so
I've got one.
Go ahead, Daniel Prabhu.
I was reading the book changes of the teachings of Lord Chaitanya the other day. They're pretty interesting.
What did you notice?
We've got here the original, page 28. The eighth offense is to consider that religious ritualistic performances, austerity or renunciation, or the performances of sacrifices are on the equal level with chanting the holy name. Chanting the holy name is as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and other pious activities may be a means to approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but when they're employed for some material achievement, they're called offensive.
that's in the original. In the
That's the
original.
original. That's the original version. Here's the revised version, page 28. The eighth offense is to consider that the religious rituals, austerity, sacrifices, and other forms of renunciation are equal to chanting the holy name. Chanting the holy name is as good as associating with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Pious activities are only means to approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they can even be performed for some materialistic reason.
That's it?
So they changed from employed for some material achievement is offensive to they can be performed for some material reason.
Let's see.
And I
Yeah,
was kind of
because
thinking of things like eco villages and things of that nature.
Very good observation.
That's what
I
I was
didn't
thinking.
quite follow. I didn't quite follow that.
Daniel
Obviously,
Prabhu,
you're
can you
onto
repeat?
something. You're
The changes. I'll just read the last sentence is the most. Yeah, it's the most changed. Um, it says chanting. Here's the original. Prabhu. Chanting the holy name is as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and other pious activities may be a means to approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But when they're employed for some material achievement, they're called offensive. Now, the last sentence for the revised one is chanting the holy name is as good as associating with the personality of Godhead. Pious activities are only means to approach the Supreme Personality, and they can even be performed for material reasons.
so the word offensive has been taken away.
The word
I'm a,
offensive, it says employed for some material achievement is offensive. Then they changed the complete thing to say they can even be performed for material reasons. Completely
yeah.
flipping
So
exactly what he
that
said.
that that is amazing. You know, the
Let's see.
whole problem is, you know, the GBC who are not elected in their, I've they've changed it. I'm sure many times since I've read the what was done the latest version, maybe 10 years ago. But in their bylaws, the GBC bylaws, those are not published. Those are not revealed. No one can read them. In their bylaws, they actually said that just like, they didn't use the word popes or whatnot, but just like one guru is there, a successor guru can change what the first guru said because now he's the present guru.
Wow.
Wow.
So that means they do not accept Prabhupada's Vani even as genuine.
Wow.
They're just waiting for the moment when they can completely rewrite the philosophy any way they please, so that they can say, well, we made it more modern. Women and homosexuals are now featured items and stuff like that, you know?
Right. It's all okay. It's all good.
So where are we going? What's the,
Well,
I
I thought
like,
that was.
Well, you were. It wasn't
Go ahead.
Udaranadatta Thakur like Prabhupada's ancestor materially or like
what,
seminally?
what, what's the name, what?
Like wasn't he Prabhupada's ancestor?
You mean
Udaranadatta Thakur. Yeah,
genealogical?
yeah.
No,
Like
no,
what? Yeah,
no,
because you were
no,
saying
no.
like Prabhupada's family was because Prabhupada talks about his family in like in the Ali Lila in a purport.
Yes.
Oh, wow. He does, huh?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Or do you want to just like read the verse?
I don't think they had a genetic relationship. You
Well, he
know,
says he's like the ancestor. It was his disappearance day the other day.
I think he may have been talking about spiritual ancestry.
No, it's. Oh, I'll just read the verse in the purport. Okay, it's a Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila, chapter 11, verse 41.
Okay.
Mahabhagavata Shrestha Datta Udaran Sarva Bhave Seva Nityananda Racharan. Udaranadatta Thakur, the 11th among the 12 cowherd boys, was an exalted devotee of the Lord Nityananda, Nityananda Prabhu. He worshipped the lotus feet of Lord Nityananda in all respects. Purport. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes in his Anupashya, the Gaurganadesh Deepika, verse 129, states as Udaranadatta Thakur was formerly the cowherd boy of Vrindavana named Subahu. Udaranadatta Thakur, previously known as Sri Udaranadatta, was a resident of Saptagrama, which is situated on the bank of the Saraswati River near Tushabhigha railway station in the district of Hooghly. At the time of Udarana Thakur, Saptagrama was a very big town encompassing many other places such as Vasudevapura, Banchaberia, Krishnapura, Nityanandapura, Shivapura, Shankanagara, and Saptagrama. Calcutta was developed under British rule by the influential mercantile community, and especially by the Suvarnabhanya community, which came down from Saptagrama to establish their businesses and homes all over Calcutta. They were known as
Hmm.
the Saptagrami mercantile community of Calcutta, and most of them belonged to the Malik and Sil families. More than half of
Wow.
Calcutta belonged to this community, as is Srila Uttaranuddata Thakur.
Huh.
Our paternal family also came from this district and belonged to the same community. The Maliks of Calcutta are divided into two families, namely the Sil family and Day family. All the Maliks of the Day family originally belonged to the same family in Gotra. We also formerly belonged to the branch of the Day family, whose members, intimately connected with the Muslim rulers, received the title Malik. In the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Antyakanda, chapter 5, it is said that Uttaranadatta was an extremely elevated and liberal Vaishnav. He was born with the right to worship Nityananda Prabhu. It is also stated that Nityananda Prabhu, after staying for some time in Karadaha, came to Saptagrama and stayed in the house of Udaranadatta, which the Suvarnavarna community to which Udaranadatta belonged was actually a Vaishnav community. Its members were bankers and gold merchants. Suvarna means gold, and Vanik means merchant. Long ago, there was a misunderstanding between Balal Sena and the Suvarnavarna community because of the great banker Gauri Sena. Balal Sena was taking loans from Gauri Sena and spending money extravagantly, and therefore Gauri Sena stopped supplying money. Balal Sena took revenge by instigating a social conspiracy to make the Suvarnavaniks outcasts, and since then they have been ostracized from the higher castes, namely the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas. But by the grace of Srila Nityananda Prabhu, the Suvarnavana community was again elevated. It is said in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Jatika Vani Kula Udarana Hoite Pavitra Hoilat Vida Nahika Vihate. There is no doubt that all the community members of the Suvarnavana society were again purified by Sri Nityananda Prabhu. In Saptagrama, there is still a temple with a six-armed deity of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that was personally worshipped by Srila Uttara Datta Thakur. On the right side of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is a deity of Sri Nityananda Prabhu, and on the left side is Gadadhar Prabhu. There's also a Radha Govinda Murti and a Shalagram Shila, and below the throne is a picture of Sri Udaranadatta Thakur. In the front of the temple, there's now a big hall, and in front of the hall is a Madhavi Lata plant. The temple is in a very shady, cool, and nicely situated location. When we returned from America in 1967, the executive committee members of this temple invited us to visit it, and thus we had the opportunity to visit this temple with some American students. Formerly in our childhood, we visited this temple with our parents because all the members of the Suvarnavana community enthusiastically take interest in this temple of Udaranadatta Thakur. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur adds in his Anupashya, in the Bengali year 1283, 88, 1876 AD, a Babaji of the name Nitai Das arranged for a donation of 12 bighas of land, about 4 acres, for the temple where Uttaranadatta Thakur worshipped. The management of the temple later deteriorated, but then in the Bengali year 1306, which is 1899 AD, through the cooperation of the famous Balaram Malik of Hooghly, who was a sub-judge and many rich Suvarnamani community members, the management of the temple improved greatly. Not more than 50 years ago, one of the family members of Udaranadatta Thakur named Jagmohan Datta established a wooden murti statue of Udaranadatta Thakur in the temple, but the murti is no longer there. At present, a picture of Udaranadatta Thakur is worshipped. It is understood, however, that the wooden murti of Udaranadatta Thakur was taken away by Sri Madan Mohan Datta and is now being worshipped with a Shalagram Shila by Srinath Datta. We learned that the Thakur was the manager of the estate of a big zamindar in Naihati, about 1.5 miles north of Katwa. The relics of this royal family are still visible near the Dainhata station, since Udaranadatta Thakur was the manager of the state. It is also known as Udaranapura. Udaranadatta Thakur installed Nitai Gaur deities that were later brought to the house of the zamindar, which was known as Vanauraribara. Srila Udaranadatta Thakur remained a householder throughout his life. His father's name was Shikhar Datta. His mother's name was Badravati, and his son's name was Srinivas Datta. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport.
Wow.
So how does that establish a genetic relationship between Prabhupada and Thakur Bhaktivinoda.
Well, he was just saying like his paternal family.
It's not a family. The Malaks is not a family name. And they take it on like a family name,
Well,
but
okay,
it's
yeah,
more, it's a distinctive name or a title more than anything else.
Well, they were in the same community.
Malik just simply means that they were very highly functioning within the Muslim structure.
Yeah.
Right? So
Well, yeah, but like he said he was from the community, then he was also from the community. Like they were both from the community. I'm pretty sure they were like related.
Well, they can be from the community, but they could all be named Malik and not be related.
No.
Because it's not a name. It's like a title.
Yeah.
That's my understanding, at least.
Okay.
But thank you for reading that. Thanks for reading that incredible passage. It was really fascinating.
It's very detailed, huh? Wow, Srila Prabhupada has given wonderful, who's being worshipped from what family and all this. Wow.
Well, this is very good genetic. It's like a historic, genetical and historic history. It establishes the genuineness and lineage of the Sampradaya and the relationships of Lord Chaitanya to others. In simplicity, we don't need it. All we need is Hare Krishna mantra and people who have never heard the Hare Krishna mantra, and we introduce it to them and get them into the mood of the Malaks and all these people by chanting. But that's the point. I love scholarship, or I used to back when I was a scholar. But my interest right now, the transparent interest that I have is in bringing the holy name to everyone, not just a few people, and everyone includes more species, all species. Of course, if you get 100,000 people, humans, to chant loudly, all the germs of their bodies will also get to hear the holy name. And the dogs and cats are outside the arena will get to know the holy name. The plants will get here, and the birds in the sky will hear. So chanting in a big atmosphere cannot be seen as simply a human experience. It must be seen as a transcendental transformation of the sound vibration on planet Earth to more and more come in contact with and represent and actually express the Hare Krishna mantra as the dominant sound vibration on the planet. Once we have established the holy name of Krishna as the predominant sound vibration on the planet, then automatically everyone will become Krishna conscious. And if we even get 10% of the people of the 10,000 years of Kali within a number of years, once those people chant, everybody else will chant, or they'll hear. Hearing and chanting is indistinguishable. So they can chant or they can hear. Let them hear. If they are insects, they're not going to chant, but let them hear, let them experience. Maybe they don't have ears, so let them feel the vibration itself on their little insect bodies. And that way we can deliver everyone, because everyone, including plants, insects, animals, birds, whatnot, they all originally came from Krishna Love. They're all jivas, all the Chittaveda Tattva, simultaneous and inconceivably one and different than Krishna.
Jai.
So that's what we need to do.
So we have one question, Prabhu. This is from Lakshmi. I think it's the Lakshmi that used to, or she's hearing the classes. Remember?
The nice lady? Young lady? Lakshmi, yes, we welcome her.
Yes, she's watching from work. She's hearing from work, sorry. Or watching or whatever.
Tell her that wherever she is working, I offer her my obeisances.
Jai, she's listening. So she asked the question: was Naranayan Prabhu present during the matchless gift shop inauguration? Was Naranayan Prabhu present there during the matchless gift shop inauguration?
Which means,
Inauguration means what? When it got started.
well, where was Matchless Gifts?
I think
New
it was
Matchless
New
York.
York.
Gifts. Oh no, Matchless Gifts. Nobody ever mentioned Matchless Gifts until recently.
Ah, acha, acha, acha.
It was on the store, but nobody thought of it or mentioned it. I don't know. I've got to reread the Hare Krishna Explosion and see if Hayagriva, who is good at this sort of quirky ideas,
Detail.
he had many quirky philosophical people, Henry Miller, Allen Ginsberg, and people like that, who were very quirky. So he was a student of quirkiness, and he taught it in college. So he may have. But Matchless Gifts, I got there after the end of Matchless Gifts. We came to 28 Second Avenue. It was a couple of blocks or something like that away from 61 Second Avenue, across the street
Acha.
and up the street towards Manhattan. And we had a second story place, which had formerly been a exclusive tuxedo haberdasher place. So it was very nicely fitted out inside in early 20th century style, before the 1920s style, before the Depression, I should say, before the 30s Depression style. And I was in charge of making that space into a temple and building the altar for that place. But Matchless Gifts was down the street, walking distance, obviously, just a couple of blocks. And by the time I got there, we had moved out of 26 Second Avenue altogether. So I was not involved with that part. I came we got the temple on 2nd Avenue, the 61 2nd Avenue. I got there in December, about November, December of 1968. And that's shortly after they gave up the Matchless Gifts place. Everything that had been there was either brought to the new location or to Prabhupada's rooms, what was behind the Matchless Gift shop. There was Matchless Gift store, sort of a place, a storefront, and then you walk past that, there's a courtyard. In the courtyard was a sort of a fountain there in the courtyard. Not fancy, probably not even operating. You go past the fountain to a set of stairs, you walk up to the left, then to the right, and to the right side of that building, sort of more or less right behind the Matchless Gift store, was Prabhupada's personal living quarters. First, he was sleeping in the Matchless Gift shop, 26 2nd Avenue, and then he was sleeping in his own apartment. And that's when he started cooking, which blew everyone out of the water.
Right.
Prabhupada's cooking was astonishing.
Wow. Jai. So,
nobody taught him to cook. He learned to cook by watching his sister.
Yes, and his mother. And
his
street
mother,
vendors. I think someone said street vendors also.
He said that?
I think you said that.
No, I didn't say that.
Oh, you didn't say that. Okay.
Wait,
no, from his family, they never would eat from street vendors.
No, he learned cooking from watching the street vendors.
I don't know who said that. I didn't say that.
Oh, okay, you didn't say it. Okay. Achha.
Wait, Narayana Prabhu, did you ever meet Pishima?
Yes.
Oh, you did?
on more than one occasion. But the weather is one extraordinary occasion. Would you like to hear some Pishima Katha?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. There's the Calcutta Temple, and it was right across from what the Bengalis call a tank, which is sort of like a square lake, reservoir, I guess. and devotees would jump in the water and swim across the long end of it and swim back and stuff like that. I never did it. Stuff. But anyhow, when you go into the temple, it was on Lenin Sarani, named after the Lenin from Russia, but then they changed it later on to Shakespeare Sarani. Sarani means avenue or something like that. So we walked up. I like them both. I like Shakespeare. I like Lenin. So I walked up the big marble stairs, and it was very grand, very wide stairs. It goes up to a little platform, turns left, and goes up to a little platform. Then you make another jog to the right, I think, and you're in the balcony. And there was a big balcony in front of the temple room across from the tank, and there were plants and whatnot. And it was very elegant. That must have been British House or something of that sort. Well, whatever it was, Pishima came one day, and I will never forget. She came with the determination of a tsunami or a tidal wave or a earthquake or when a irresistible force meets an immovable object. Anyhow, she treated everything in front of her like an immovable object, and she was the irresistible force. So she came, and she was, plump Bengali lady, cooked with mustard oil and all that means in terms of keeping your gorilla shape. Anyhow, she had pots, half a dozen pots. Unbelievable how one woman could, well, the Indians are used, you can see pictures of Indians carrying multiple pots on their heads or in their arms. It's just the way it was because people didn't have skateboards or bicycles, they had feet. So they would carry everything by hand in villages particularly. Well, she was not a villager. She was from Chitpur Street, Upper Chitpur Street, which was an elegant residential area where Prabhupada was born, from the Malik family. And so she was walking up the stairs with these copper brass pots, hammered brass pots. You may have seen the texture on the outside. They hammer them, and they put inside, they put tin or something of that sort, so that the copper pot doesn't, if you put acid food, it doesn't turn the food black. And she had these pots full, and she staggered up. She didn't stagger, she strode up the stairs as like an immovable force, unstoppable force, and as though everyone and everything in front of her was an immovable object that would get in her way if she didn't get through it. And so she came up to the top carrying the pots. The devotees rushed forward to help her carry. She refused. They wanted to carry them herself. And she had maybe 3 or so big pots and then little pots that sat on top of the edges of the big pots, so it stacks of pots in every direction. And she came up with her sorry, undetermined as anything. And when she came up to the top, she demanded to know where was Prabhupada. I don't think she called him Prabhupada. She called him, what? I don't know, Abe maybe? I don't know what she called him, I forgot. But she came up to the top, and Prabhupada had given strict orders that she, a woman, his sister, family member, was not to be allowed in his quarters because he was a sannyasi. You know, considering how many American girls and European English girls would come and sit in Prabhupada's quarters, he seemed like almost a little bit extra for Prabhupada to demand that his own sister not be allowed in. But this was Bengal, this was Calcutta. And even if he had these American boys and girls hanging out in his room at times with, males too, not just alone with him, that he wanted to create the exact correct impression. Plus, he wanted to create the exact standard for his sister because she didn't give a fig. She and he played together like twins growing up. And they did the Rathiatras. They did the deity dressing. They made deity clothes. They played at being pure devotees. And it worked. So, so they were so used to just having this intimate relationship, of brother-sister relationship, prepubescent, obviously, that that when she came up, she wanted to enter the room in the mood of the prepubescent relationship she had with Prabhupada, Bhaktivedanta, or actually Abhay Charan. He wanted to come up the stairs and have a relationship with her brother Abhay. And the devotees were told by Prabhupada to keep her from coming in. So here comes the irresistible force up the stairs and across towards Prabhupada's room. And there was the immovable objects in the form of the devotees trying to prevent her from going in. And she just went in. It wasn't that she pushed anyone aside. Her psychic force was so powerful that no one could stand in her path. She had tremendous Shakti. And she went in. And Prabhupada was complaining, oh no, you cannot come in. You're my sister family member, and stuff like that. He said, I have brought you food. He said, well, I don't eat mustard oil anymore. He said, I have brought the mustard oil, your favorite dishes, you know. So after a short time of protest, they sat down and were intimately talking in the most extraordinarily nice way. Brother and sister talked, just as though they were little prepubescent kids grown up into adult bodies, but with that same, if you know what I mean, these little kids, like up to 5, 6 years old, before they start getting very gender aware, they talk to each other just heart to heart, mind to mind, psyche to psyche, and it's a very wonderful thing to watch. And here we were watching, oh my God, what was it? So then she put out prasad for Prabhupada. Prabhupada didn't want to eat it, but then of course he said, taste it, you know, I mean, good God, how are you going to say no to an immovable force? Unstoppable force. He said, taste it. So he tasted it, next thing you know, he was wolfing down plates of it and cooked in mustard oil, which is a wonderful way of cooking, which is not acceptable in our line. But if you ever had a chance to eat traditional Bengali food cooked in mustard oil, it's amazing. What they do is they take a round brass plate that's about 12, 14 inches wide, say 12 inches wide, 12 inches wide, 12 or, yeah, you have to make it with a little lip on the edges, made of brass, but this, no tin on polishing on top of it. So what happened is, then they take a rice, a kilo, 2.2 pounds of cooked Bengali rice, which is sort of like short grain brown rice, but with an exquisite flavor that you cannot even imagine. And then in little round brass cups are subjis, cooked in mustard oil mostly, ghee and mustard oil and spices. And they go around, are planted around the edge of the plate. So when the Bengali is eating, he takes a dip into the sabji with his fingers or with a chapati, and then dips into the rice. He takes a mouthful of rice with the sabji. And why such a big bunch of rice? Because the sabji is cooked in mustard oil and chilies and is too hot to eat. You cannot even eat it unless you have a lot of rice. And this is the way they entertained, tortured, and pleasured themselves with the sabjis and the rice. About 8 sabjis. And they're all different and absolutely excruciatingly delicious. And now, I would like you to know, I'm just not going to try to get too far off track. Even as a karmi, before I was a vegetarian, I was a gourmet cook. and belonged to groups of gourmet cooks, and we used to have potlucks where we would take turns cooking for the group. So I was that. And then I became a devotee, and I was cooking for Prabhupada sometimes. And so I learned how to cook, Indian style cooking, but I had the instinct how to cook itself. Now I don't cook, I just cook tofu, but and ghee. But I just cooked in ghee that I made myself. It is 10,000 times better than the ghee from the store. So anyhow, I just finished the ghee today. So making it. So anyhow, I have this taste for gourmet taste. So when I was given a thali like that, and I was taking the sabji and the rice, I mean, fainting would have been an understatement of how I felt by tasting it. It was so good. And then you'd wash it down with lassi. And lassi in those days was not the way they serve it now. Unfortunately, ISKCON created that lassi. Lassi in those days was misti lahi or kara lassi. Misti lahi, dahi, misti lassi was made from dahi, yogurt, and it was churned with rose water, sugar, and raw sugar and rose water, pure rose water. And it was served with cardamom bits on top. The kara lassi was made up with salt and dry spices, like you take the cardamom and everything and roast it on a dry pan and then sprinkle it on top. My God, they were both incredibly good. So you'd be burning your intestines and mouth out to the degree that you thought you would never live again. And then cool your body with lassi. Unbelievable experience. And just to add a little, this is slightly off track, but it gives some substance to Pishava's cooking, and which I tasted but did not get much of. But it was, I mean, die and go to heaven would be an understatement. So I was suffering from dysentery there, and I had no way to cure it. So Prabhupada told all of us, a lot of us did have dysentery. We just, our intestines was just going zoom and just diarrhea 24/7. So we were not allowed to eat any spicy food, and we were not, typical Bengali food, and we were not, all we were allowed to eat was chipped rice, which is like, I guess, roasted rice in flakes that are roasted and then served with yogurt and bananas. Huh? Yes.
Right.
Yes. And so that's all I ate for a couple of weeks. And it was horrible for me to eat that diet. And so finally, we were invited to someone's house who was known to be a superb Bengali cook family. The whole family of women were superb cooks. So we went there with the devotees. And I went, and they said, "No, you cannot go." I said, "Why not?" "Because if you eat that, it's so spicy, you have dysentery, you will die." I said, "I will die if I eat any more chipped rice and yogurt and bananas. I'm going to go. And if I die, I will die with a smile on my face. And you can take me to the burning ghat with a smile on my face, but I will be smiling, and that's what I'm going to do." So they couldn't stop me. And I went there, and I gorged myself on this Bengali cooking with the mustard oil and the ghee and the spices and the chipped rice, and not the chipped rice, the not basmati rice, that's the other northern India. The what you call it, Bengali rice, and I ate and ate and ate, and I said, "I am now ready to die." I was so contented, so happy, and full to the gills. I said, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die without an inch left in my digestive tract. And so I went back to the temple, fully ready to die. The next morning, I woke up, I no longer had dysentery. I was completely cured by that food, the Bengali food. All that spices must have killed one of the germs
Kicked
for
it
trying
out.
to. Yeah, so they know that's the end of that. So Pashima. So Pashima was there, and she spent so much time with Prabhupada. They were laughing. They were all talking and only in Bengali. So, and it was such a nice Bengali too. They were highly educated, highly refined, high birth. That's even more important in terms of accent, is your high birth. So the Malik, high birth, they were expressing their high births through language in the beautiful, intricate ways in which they exchange words. And I was raised, I also, amongst other things, was a classical musician growing up, and I ended a folk musician, and I ended up playing 15 instruments. So I was used to listening to tonalities and harmonies, and listening to them talking was just, it was just like Mozart on steroids. It went way beyond Mozart. It was just an amazing, wonderful thing to hear them talking. Plus the fact that they're both on the, basically, I don't know if she was an Uttamadhikari or not, but by his association, she might as well have been. And they were talking so intimately and so wonderfully that, I mean, it was almost impossible to sit up or stand up or do anything, not even roll on the floor to hear them talking. It was just so wonderful. So that went on until it got to be quite dark. I had married my second Krishna conscious wife, who my first one left, and I was not happy, and then I got remarried. But she was with me. It was sort of like almost like a honeymoon. We were there. This was 1974, and we were visiting the temples and doing stuff, and I was buying stuff for a store we created in Beverly Hills for Spiritual Sky called the Desire Tree, yeah, on Beverly Drive. So anyhow, that's before Rodeo Drive took off. So Beverly Drive was what Rodeo Drive is today. So anyhow, I was on a buying spree, and $1 could buy you $17 worth of merchandise in India. In other 17 rupees, $1 could trade on the black market for 17 rupees. 1 rupee could buy what a dollar would buy in America. So you can imagine, I had $35,000. I was going insane with amazingly advantageous purchases. I didn't waste a penny, 1 rupee, 1 paisa. So anyhow, there we are. So there she is, and my now ex-wife was there, and son of 2 of my children, and the mother of 2 of my children. And so then they came to me and said, Pachima is afraid of taking a rickshaw home. And she does not like to sit in a taxi. Her idea was of the taxis, she could become kidnapped. And not liking to take the rickshaw at night, but somebody could come, and she had gold chains around her neck, you know. Somebody could come, this is what people used to do in New Delhi, at least I've seen it myself and heard about it a lot, is a woman would be standing on the street corner to cross the street with big gold chains on her neck. Somebody on a motor scooter with somebody on the back of the motor scooter would stop in front of her. That guy would get out, yank the gold chain off of her neck, and they'd take off on the motor scooter. We're talking thousands of dollars. So Pashima had gold chains. She didn't want to be attacked in the rickshaw, and she didn't want to be kidnapped in the taxi. So they asked me, would I and my wife of the time be willing to escort her home? You can imagine. You can imagine. Oh, I don't think I even got the word yes out before I was sitting in the, she didn't ride in the, she had somebody with her, maybe her son, or maybe she was alone in the rickshaw. And I was in the rickshaw with my wife behind me, behind her. We didn't ride in the same rickshaw. I would never do it. Commit such a great offense against Krishna's devotees. And she was ahead of us. So I was standing there ready to do war with anyone that dared to pop out of the darkness. And I was a good fighter. I know fighting well. And I also know how to protect myself and others with the mantra in order to Shukadev. So I was ready to take them on, take them on. So I'd already done the Lord Shukadev mantra to change amazing destiny issues in England and other places. So what I did was we went behind her. So we thought, this is nice, such an honor. We could see her beautiful, rotund, smooth shape in the sari going ahead, covered her hair, covered with the sari. And we got to her apartment. And so we thought, okay, this is the tragedy of my life, is I've escorted her to our apartment. It's the most wonderful thing that's ever happened to me. But the saddest thing is that we must say goodbye to her right here. She invited us in. I couldn't believe it. Her apartment was interesting because it had a gigantic bed in it, like a king-size bed, in a room that was barely larger than the king-size bed. So we were sitting on chairs at the foot of the bed with only maybe like a foot or a foot and a half in between us and the end of the bed. So we were up against the wall in chairs, English-style chairs, and there was the bed that was nicely laid out, not fancy, but just nice. And her nephew was there. I think they lived there. He must have had another room. And there must have been other rooms, so I really saw this one space. And they brought us hot milk with cardamom and stuff. Dying at that moment would not be a bad thing either. It was just too much for me to handle. It was so wonderful. And she sat there speaking in Bengali, and he kept on translating. And she was telling me the childhood pastimes of Srila Prabhupada. It took me and my wife in Bengali, and he translated it in such a way that I could easily understand that he was speaking exactly what she was saying, but in English instead of in Bengali. So that went on. And it went on for several hours, at least 2 hours. I don't think it went on 4 hours. So somewhere between 2 and 4 hours it went on. And we were just thunderstruck. I don't know what I could say. We were just beyond taken, beyond ecstasy, beyond everything. It wasn't like being with Srila Prabhupada, because Prabhupada is the Acharya. He's my spiritual master. He knows everything. And being in his presence, one senses that one's in the presence of Krishna channeling through Prabhupada. When he said, make me dance like a puppet on a string, he meant Paramatma, Krishna, would be channeling, would be the active bird, and he would become the passive bird, contrary to the Gita. And so I'm used to listening to Krishna speaking through Prabhupada's words, mouth, and mind, the puppet, as it were. Not very puppet-like puppet, but nonetheless, categorically. He was not speaking his own thoughts and words from his childhood. And growing up, he was speaking Krishna's words as Krishna spoke them through his mouth. That I understood many, many decades later. However, I was listening to Pashima, and she was talking wonderfully, transcendently, anecdotally, but as a woman. And her womanly approach was not motherly. Well, I think she had children and whatnot, but she wasn't speaking in a motherly fashion. She was speaking as a lady devotee of the Lord who happened to be Srila Prabhupada's practically psychic twin sister. To be with Pashima next to her, as her nephew was speaking, and being aware that it was almost as though Prabhupada and Pashima were twins, and they were sort of like, she was younger, but they were like psychic twins growing up. And there she was, speaking, I could hear her sound vibration. And remember, I didn't have hearing aids at those days. I was deaf. So it was very hard for me to hear the way I hear right now with hearing aids. But I heard with my heart and my mind and the jiva, who I happen to be. At that time, a neophytely revealing, self-revealing jiva, but neophyte listening to her, it was this transformative experience. So when it was all done, we got into a rickshaw. I don't know if the same rickshaw waited or if it was a new rickshaw. We got into the rickshaw and went back to the temple, went up those big stairs that she had staggered up, not steps, strode up fearlessly and unstoppably with pots of prasadam. The irresistible force going up those stairs through and into and up to and through the immovable objects of Prabhupada saying no, and the disciples saying you can't go in there, it didn't even slow her down. And that, did you ask me if I met Kashima Prabhu? Was that your question? Hello?
Yes,
Yeah,
that
was
was this. Yes.
Prabhu, who must have asked me?
Me?
Vishnu Tejas, Prabhu.
Mr. Tejas, you asked me if I met Kashima.
Yes.
I did.
Hare Krishna.
I heard
Hare Krishna.
Kirtanananda didn't let Bhishma cook for Prabhupada, and then Prabhupada got mad at him, and he was like, "Don't you ever think you know more than the spiritual master?" And then Kirtanananda like stormed out of Vrindavan, and he went back to America.
Because of what?
Kirtanananda wasn't letting Bhishma cook for Prabhupada, and then Prabhupada got angry at Kirtanananda, and he told Kirtanananda, "Don't you ever think you know more than the spiritual master?" And then Kirtanananda like got mad and he stormed out and he went back to America.
Where he went to the temple on Nationalist Gifts, 22nd Avenue, took off of his dhoti, took off his neck beads, told all the devotees to do the same, and that this was the new way that Prabhupada wanted devotees to be dressed. When Prabhupada came back, he gave him sannyas, which was the opposite of kicking him out of the movement. But it was of the same sort of idea. He kicked him into a place where he could no longer do anything except quote Prabhupada. So when he did that, that was before he blooped with Hayagriva, where they went off to publish the Bhagavad Gita as it is, Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is, trying to publish it under their own names with big publishers who quite intelligently and wisely didn't realize that these two yokels, in spite of one of them being a college professor, could not possibly have translated in written purports. So they failed.
Cheaters.
And from that time, when it was like 1966 or 7, up until 1969, Hayagriva kept the Bhagavad Gita as it is hostage. So Prabhupada had Ray Rama re-edit it so that he could publish it. And later on, he said that Gita with the Vishnu on the cover, he said that Gita we should never read because it had some Mayavada conclusions put in by Ray Rama. So then in 1969, finally, Prabhupada got the original document from Hayagriva and Macmillan published it, and the rest is history.
Right.
So it was a pretty rocky road, wasn't it? So we think of it as being so sublime, and it was. But there was also a very rocky road. one of the greatest things was people didn't doubt that if they went into a town, they could open a temple, even if they'd been in the movement only 6 months. Yeah, why not? You know everything. You know how to chant Hare Krishna. You can play mridanga. You can play a little harmonium. You know how to cook a few recipes. Isn't it time you opened the temple?
Right, right.
And that's what they did.
Yeah.
So that's the Hare Krishna explosion meant you're in the temple 6 months. Well, what are you doing here? You have to go open the temple. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. Amazing.
So
everyone here will open a temple, I guess.
well, yeah. Put it this way. Back then, the minimum wage was $1.25 an hour for thereabouts. But if an apartment, you could rent an apartment or a storefront for $50, and we're talking like a big one-bedroom apartment, or even a 2-bedroom apartment for $75 a month. So even with a small amount, that's minimum wage, I always earned $3.50 an hour, which was the equivalent of $10 an hour now, or $15 an hour now with the new minimum wage increase. But if I have $15 an hour, can I go out and rent an apartment? $75 apartment is now $2,000 or $3,000.
No way.
The same apartment I should have. In San Francisco, I lived in when I was in college. I had girlfriends. We lived together. That was because the birth control pill had just been invented. And as soon as the birth control pill was invented in the early 60s, all the student girls started taking them. And as a result, all the boys and girls shacked up together because there was the big danger of sex in those days was pregnancy.
Right.
And abortion was illegal, so having an abortion was not that easy either. So, nor did people really want an abortion. They just didn't want to, the girls didn't want to get pregnant until they were married for obvious reasons. So anyhow, when the birth control pill came out, then people were just cohabiting. And a relationship lasted 1 or 2 semesters. You just stay together for 1 or 2 semesters. As long as you're in school. Then when the summer came, you break up and go and do something else.
Cat and dog life.
So that birth control pill is what caused the entire hippie movement to take off, caused the skateboard generation to take off. It's just a matter of evolution of the birth control pill. Because people didn't have to worry anymore about pregnancy.
Right.
But anyhow, let's get back onto the transcendental topics. So that's what Kirtananda did. He and Hare Griva blew, but they went out and rented leased a big place, 450 acres in West Virginia, of all places.
How much? 3,000?
What?
How many acres?
450.
Oh, that West Virginia is 450 acres? I thought it was 3,000 something acres, no?
It became over 4,000 acres when they bought land.
Oh, wow.
But it started out with what did I say, 450 acres, I think? Not
Yes.
450 acres on a mountainside.
Right.
Not very good, not at all farmland. It was all mountain. But and there was a old sort of like settler shack on the land that had a living room and a kitchen, and upstairs was an attic, and that was it. And a basement. Not a basement, just the house was up so that you could walk under the house, and it was about 6 feet or 5.5 or 6 feet high till the timbers, big hand chopped, hand hewn oak timbers. And so you walk down there in the basement, and they ended up, so anyhow, but my destiny seems to have been reinforcing floors under temple rooms. I did it in New York, they were in Henry Street, and I did it in Boston when they had the printing press there. Had to put timbers under the floor because when the devotees were jumping up and down, the floor was in danger of collapsing, both in New York and Henry Street and in Boston. But in New Vrindavan, Kirtananda absolutely forbade us to dance during Kirtan. So he went away for a few days. And during those days, I got terribly busy. And I put a big timber under the floor and put a big block of stone and put a big post on top of that and secured it all together. And then I created a drain from the kitchen because he liked the kitchens to be filthy, being Kirtananda, no? He said that's the way they were in India. When I went to India, they were made with mud and cow dung, but they were clean as a whistle. They were not filthy. So anyhow, he was filthy homosexual. So yeah, I hope nobody on the line is homosexual. If you are, I ignore what I just said. So the thing is that that's the way it was. So so when Kirtananda came back, he found the kitchen was all clean and that there was a drain coming out of it going down the hill filled with black murk that had formerly been 6 inches deep on the kitchen floor, where people had to walk through the kitchen floor up to their ankles in muck, in black muck.
Wow, this guy was really dirty, huh? Wow.
Oh my, very. And so what happened is that so I got the kitchen floor clean. Before that time, Labanga Latik, who later on went to India, they had a wonderful cow protection program. And her son was Mr. DDD, Dwarkadish, who was 6 years old at the time. She was walking around there in the mud up to the ankles. So I took a plank that was sort of like 3 by 4 or 3 by 6 or something of that sort, a block of wood, like a 2 by 4 type of block of wood, and then put steps underneath it, like those Chinese shoes, you know, sandals where they have like these big wooden cleats under the shoe. I don't know if you're familiar. But anyhow, the Chinese wore them in the old days. And I made them like that. So whenever she walked around in the muck, she was above the muck. But she walked above the muck because her shoes were like 6 inches thick. And so I called them transcendental lotus slippers because she was like a lotus floating above the muck. So anyhow, so Kirtananda came back and we came in for Kirtan, and I told all the devotees, don't dance. I'd reinforced the floor a week before, and we were always dancing like crazy on the floor. So I said, don't dance until I give you the signal. So we were having a kirtan there, and somebody tried to dance in the kirtan. No, stop, and like that, you know. We let that go on, and then at the end, suddenly, like 6 or 7 of us in the room started leaping up and down on the floor. Kirtananda was screaming, horrified, thinking that we were all going to land in the basement because the old farmhouse would collapse. But I reinforced it. And I said, no, Kirtananda, it is now reinforced. I did that. And so he hated it when I did anything like that. He liked things decrepit.
Wow.
And I also, just to finish this little segment, we ran out of food. We never had anything to eat. But we had a horse named Ukeshrava. who is that's the horse from the time of the churning of the ocean of milk, I think. Anyhow, the horse named Ukeshwara. And so we had oats for the horse, big sacks of oats, a sack of oats for the horse. And we had a cow named Raven, I forget the name of the cow. We had a cow, and then we had a goat named Ravachagi, who probably said was a Muslim in her previous life. Oh, the cow was named Sarabi or something of that sort. And we were milking the cow, but we had no food. So I took the horse's oats and brought it up and cooked oatmeal out of it and served it with rich cow's milk. And devotees could not even believe their eyes that there was something to eat in Vrindavan. And
Amazing.
when Srila, I ate well on the oatmeal. When Srila Prabhupada came down his little stairs from the attic, little tiny winding stairs from the attic, he said, Narayana. I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. He said, have you eaten? And I'd eaten a lot, but it was a time of austerity in Vrindavan. I didn't want to say I ate a lot. So I said, a little bit, Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada looked at me sternly and said, why not a big bit? And I had eaten a very big bit of oatmeal with some sugar, and which we did have, and cow's milk on it. So anyhow, there now you know the history of this god. So that was during that time that I agree about. We were reading from the Bhagavad Gita as it is, from the manuscript that Hayagriva had edited. But he hadn't given it back to Prabhupada even in 1969. And Prabhupada went there, calm as a cucumber, and would sit there in the class and give class from the. He never asked for the manuscript back. And, people thought there would be a knockdown, drag-out fight or something of that sort. But there wasn't. Nothing. And then when Srila Prabhupada left, he left. He went to Los Angeles, and there he called on Hayagriva to come there. When he called on Hayagriva brought the manuscript, and it was published. It's sort of interesting how Prabhupada operated amongst very drastic and somewhat dangerous people. So anyhow, that ends that little segment. We've traveled from India to Fukushima to Hayagriva to Chirtananda, to Vrindavan. So the acreage, they really ended up buying the farm from the people who owned it. It was a couple of guys who I think had inherited it, bought it, or leased it or something. No, they bought it. And they were leasing it from them for practically nothing. And then they bought it. And then they started adding, when time came, they added other acreages until they ended up with over 4,000 acres. And the farmhouse became more or less abandoned because after they got the other acreage, because the other roads, the other land was available by road. You wound up on the top of the hill, you have to go up a deeply rutted dirt road, which in the winter you couldn't drive up. And they had a big old-fashioned Lincoln Continental to drive with no back springs, so it was bouncing up and down on its rear wheels. And that's how Kirtananda would drive up and down. Hayagriva would drive up and down in a little Volkswagen Bug. So we were basically stranded there. So when we moved all the way down, when they moved all the way down, I wasn't part of that. And when Prabhupada came, I came twice. And the second time I came, Prabhupada came. That time I built a big window in the sky, a big window in the attic. So Prabhupada had a big window instead of just being crammed into a dark little attic. So I built that for Prabhupada. It went across, and it's still there. So anyhow, that's that. What else do we want to touch on? We didn't get even a mile to its Falgun Krishna Panchami.
Wait, what?
But this present group of people would be perfect for dealing with the Falgun Krishna Panchami. Highly intelligent, highly educated group. That's what we need. Not only educated and intelligent, but self-realized. Self-realized means transparent, because you are already part of Krishna, right? You're already part and parcel of Krishna. It's not like the part and parcel is somewhere else, or some incomparable. It's like the Christians say you have a soul. I like to walk up to Christians or anybody, and I say, you know, I don't have a soul. They look at me like they're about to faint or they're about to kill me or something like that sort. And I say, I don't have a soul. I said, you don't have a soul. Are you an atheist? I say, no. I am the soul, and I have a body. Aham Brahma.
Right.
I am the soul. I have a body. And I say, it's very analogous to how did you get to the store in a car? I am the driver. I am the driver, and I drive the car. I'm not a car that may or may not have been, as some people believe, as a driver. No. Or I have faith that I'm a driver. No, I'm not a car. I'm the driver, and I drive the car. And I said, you parked your car. It's a store, now you parked your car. So did the car die? No, because you're here. You're going to go back to the car and you'll drive away in it. So that's what the soul is like. He comes into the body, leaves the body, and drives the car when he's in the body. The mistake is identifying, thinking that it's you, which it is not, never has been, never can be, and never will be. So transparency means that I understand, not intellectually, just existentially, that I am sat, or eternal. Prabhupada said, consciousness is the indicator of the soul. So if I am the soul, if I'm conscious, that's the proof that I'm the soul, if I accept Prabhupada, which I do. And so Prabhupada's teaching, and his teaching is that consciousness, so anything that is conscious is a soul, being a soul, and therefore conscious. Consciousness is not a byproduct. The scientists like to say, oh, the brain is doing this, there's electrons and electrodes and whatnot going this way and that way. No, that is just false. Absolutely false. The soul is conscious, and consciousness then is how we can experience being the soul. So self-consciousness, not like the person who's embarrassed, but the self-conscious, meaning self-realized, therefore it's not difficult to identify as the soul. But the trick is, and how you can do it right now, and not ever have to worry about it again once you get the hang of it, which might take a few days, hours, or weeks, and that is, what you do is, you look at yourself, if I'm sat, then what is asat? Then you look at your body, that's asat. It's temporary. Why am I identifying with temporary? Why do I identify with my friends? Why do I think what is going to make someone happy or sad? Why do I think what will be polite? Why do I think about anything? Why do I concern myself with relativities? Why do I try to compare this to that? It's ridiculous. I am sat and so are you. So sat to sat means clarity of existence. There's no reason to harbor the asat. But look at devotees, look at the whole ISKCON movement. Everybody is purifying their asat bodies and minds. They're trying to become purified by chanting, and they are. but they're still in the consciousness of being embodied. Oh, that's okay, because now when I become Krishna conscious, when I die, I'll go back to home, back to Godhead. Well, your body is not going back to home, back to Godhead. And your body is what's becoming purified. If you can understand that the body will be automatically purified by chanting, but you're not trying to, but your body actually can't be purified. It's made of earth, fire, water, air, and heat. It's made out of material objects, material elements. Those are not purifiable. The mind can be purified. The false ego, the ego can be purified. The self is pure, the jiva is pure, but the body can never be pure. So why keep on trying to make it? Well, you have to follow the regulated principles. That's a twofold task. The number one task of the four regulated principles is you don't put poison in your body, which makes it hard to think and feel and realize spiritual things. Duh. The other reason to not to follow the regulated principles is you can't make spiritual advancement unless you do. So the Kanista Adhikari starts out on the spiritual path, Aham Brahmasmi, meaning Achinaveda Vedatattva. I am simultaneously one and different than Krishna. Therefore, as the realization or the understanding that in the Kanista Adhikari's level, I can then resist, have a means by chanting and by being a devotee. I have the mantra, I have the means to resist succumbing to the objects of the four regulated principles. You can back away from those and remain safe. That's the Kanista Adhikari platform. So ISKCON has basically, sort of like clumsily and elegantly as both, engaged and is engaging in the Kanista Adhikari platform. But there's two more levels. And the guru, the bona fide guru, comes from the Uttama platform, which is the third level up, which does not involve being an embodied soul. You can be in your body, but you're completely separate from your body. And that means that even though you're in your body, you can be in your rasa with Krishna, and the Kirtana Maya will roll up, and you'll come under the protection of Mahamaya, Yoga Maya, and you will see Krishna face to face. In your rasa with Krishna, because before the Kirtana Maya rolls up, you're a Madhyamadikari. And Madhyam means medium. The word medium comes from Madhyam, Sanskrit. And so the Kirtana Maya is there. So the Madhyamadikari is like sitting in darkness. Prabhupada compares it like a coconut inside of a coconut shell, a mature coconut inside of a coconut shell. If you rattle the shell, you can hear the coconut inside rattling and banging around inside the shell. Okay, that's the jiva, and the shell is the material energy, which is dark. We look out the window, it's dark. So that dark enclosure is where the Madhyamadikari works to develop pure, unalloyed love of God. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, the whole thing. When he has perfected that, it means nothing. His perfecting it means nothing. Because his perfecting it could be just because he wants to do something perfect for himself, meaning his mind and body. No, perfecting it means something else. In the Madhyamadikari, perfecting it means he is making an offering to Krishna, and Krishna is aware of the offering on the other side. In Krishna Loka, he is aware of you offering. Don't worry about Krishna being outnumbered. There's only one Krishna. Krishna is the Krishna in Krishna Loka receiving your offering is the Krishna with whom you are going to have your eternal rasa when you get through, when the curtain of Maya rolls up. So, in that status, you are busy offering. Supposing, I like to use the word fanning with a peacock fan because it's easy to understand. Supposing I get the idea that I want to cool Krishna with my peacock fan. I may have an imaginary Krishna, like the Brahmin who made to cook the sweet rice and then burned his finger. Or I may have a deity that I'm fanning. But whatever it is, I want the Krishna to experience relief, satisfaction, pleasure, coolness from my fanning. So if I imagine how Krishna would like to be fanned, I fan accordingly. What I do not know, maybe I sense it or feel it, and it increases with time, as I am fanning Krishna through the black curtain of Maya Devi, the coconut shell, as I'm fanning Krishna, what I do not see, because I cannot see Krishna, is Krishna very much beginning to like the way he's being fanned by me. He's beginning to like it more and more. So I fan more and more to his pleasure. Feeling his pleasure reciprocating with me, I feel that he's feeling pleasure by my fanning him, and I have zero proof that that is the case. It's just the way I feel. What is that feeling when it's perfect? Rasa, relishable relationship with Krishna. So as I fan Krishna and he experiences pleasure and I experience his pleasure by fanning him, I don't know if I'm giving him pleasure or not, but I feel there is a reciprocation of pleasure. Me, the pleasure of fanning, him, the pleasure of being fanned. When that reaches perfectional stage, Prabhupada said, and he wiggled his fingers like somebody's rolling something up, sideways fingers, to roll, spool it up. And he said, when Krishna is fully satisfied, and when the devotee has reached his perfectional stage of making an offering to Krishna, this case it's fanning, but it has to be many other things also, obviously, not just fanning. When that occurs, Prabhupada said, the curtain of Maya rolls up. He comes under the protection of Yoga Maya, and he can see Krishna face to face. Where? In Krishna Loka. In his present body? Yes. He doesn't have to die and go to heaven like a Christian. No. In this one birth, he can go from Madan to Udamadakari, if he can, please Krishna to the degree that Krishna is fully satisfied and the Jiva, the Madhyamadakari, has nothing more to sacrifice or give up of material desire, thinking, feeling, willing, none of that. Gone. Only offering pure, unalloyed love of God. That's all. Pure, unalloyed love of God. And when that pure, unalloyed love of God is there, the Madhyamadakari then becomes the Uttamadakari. And then he's qualified to give Diksha in an ISKCON temple. That is the main idea. So our mission here, simple. We want to understand that the Diksha Guru must be an Uttama Adhikari if there's going to be any result. Otherwise, it's just chewing the already chewed. The disciple knows as much as the Guru, and the Guru knows as much as the disciple. And maybe he did this, he met Prabhupada, wow, he met Prabhupada. None of that is of importance to your spiritual events and that your Guru met Prabhupada. What makes sense, what makes the difference in your spiritual life is if your Guru is not an Uttamadakari, and I will guarantee you, money back, double your Diksha, double your Dakshina back guarantee, that he's not a pure devotee like Prabhupada. Therefore, Prabhupada is your guru if you want to become an Uttama Adhikari. And if you want to become a Kanista Adhikari, keep on worshiping the guy whose big butt is sitting on the red chair. There's nothing wrong with it if you don't want to go anywhere, because it states in the Nectar of Instruction, the Upadeshamrita, that you can take in the Kanista, who we all are attempting to be, or aspiring to be Kanista Adhikaris, actual ones, real ones, and the Madhyam can also offer Diksha. They can also initiate. But the disciple must be on the same level as his guru. Oh, that doesn't sound too good, does it? On the same level as his guru? These are the words of Rupa Goswami, which is none different than Rupa Manjari, one of the closest associates of Radha and Krishna in the spiritual sky in Krishna Loka. Must be on the same level, and he cannot make much advancement under his insufficient guidance. So we can understand what is the application to our ISKCON movement. It's going on very nicely, and nothing needs to be changed. But the disciples of these present gurus these are Kanista Adhikari gurus. It says right there in the Nectar of Instruction, the Upadeshamrita, that he can accept disciples that are on the check, and he's doing that. He's accepting disciples. And that disciple must be on the same level, check. That disciple is on the same level, and sometimes even more advanced, but he cannot make much advancement under that guru's insufficient guidance, because that guru is not on the Uttama Adhikari platform, which, if you recall, I just mentioned what it's like to go from Madhyam Adhikari to Uttama Adhikari. Perfection of life. That's not the ISKCON guru. They kick them out if they fall down. That's not a guru. The perfection of life means Prabhupada level, Bhaktisiddhanta level, Gorkha Jodas Babaji level, Thakur Bhaktivinoda level. If it's not that level, then worship the one that the last one in the line of the cyclic succession that is that level. And in our case, without question, I think without doubt, that person is Srila Prabhupada. Not because he's my guru, not because he's a big shot, not because he opened so many temples, not because he turned hippies into Brahmins. That's sort of a miracle by itself. No, because he was an Uttama Adhikari. And if anyone of the Kanista Adhikaris become Uttama Adhikari, then they will be qualified to give initiation. But as of today, after so many decades after Prabhupada entering Samadhi prematurely, they have not yet produced one Uttama Adhikari. When Bhavananda became guru, he went to Australia. In Australia, he became back to his homosexual. He turned Govindas into a homosexual enclave, and all the homosexuals used to gather there. So is that the Uttama Adhikari? He had hundreds of disciples in Australia. That's why they didn't want to kick him out of being a guru, because he knew very wealthy people in Calcutta, like Charan Kanti Ghosh, and I forget the other guy's name, who's Bajoria, C.L. Bajoria. And he was bringing in lakhs and crores and lakhs of rupees into the movement. You can't let that guru leave. And in Australia, he had hundreds of disciples. If you kick him out, all his disciples will bloop. We don't want the disciples to bloop. So that's why they kept practicing homosexual as guru. In Vrindavan, Bhavananda was upstairs on Janmashtami day having a homosexual encounter with one of his homosexual associates. He bathed or not bathed, I don't know, but he came downstairs and performed the Janmashtami major artik in the Vrindavan temple after just having homosexual sex. But he has to be called an Uttamadhikari because otherwise his disciples might leave. They all love him. Don't ask me in what way. And the wealthy Indians think he's so charming, and he is charming. He's very charming. I knew him. He was under my assistant. I didn't know he was gay at the time, but he was my assistant. He was incredibly charming. He was charming when he was a karmi. Tamal Krishna saw his charm as such an asset that after he joined the movement, he went back to his homosexual associates in Los Angeles. I think it was Los Angeles, maybe it was New York. And Tamal either drove or flew there, depending on where it was, and brought him back again. And he went on to become a major homosexual figure in ISKCON. So is that what Prabhupada intended the ISKCON guru to be like?
No.
I wouldn't think so, would you? And it says in the Upadesh Amrita, written by Rupa Manjari in the form of Rupa Goswami, that the Kanistadhikari guru and Madhyam even guru, you cannot make much advancement under their insufficient guidance. The Madhyamādhikari guru would be, in principle, better than a Kanistadhikari guru. But the problem with the Madhyamādhikari guru is he has not yet seen Krishna. He hasn't seen Krishna, so how can he see Krishna? How can he teach you to see Krishna if he has not seen Krishna? And that's the purpose of the guru, is to show you the direction, as Bhaktisiddhanta put it, or Prabhupada put it about Dr. Siddhanta giving us direction. Direction is not right and left, train station, post office. No, direction means how to become Bhakti Lata Beach, vertical direction, up. And when you get to that direction, then you can become a Madhyamādhikari, and then an Uttamadhikari, and then Guru, spiritual master of the world. Okay, Prabhus, does that make sense?
Right.
Any questions? Or do you want to say something?
I think I'm good right now.
Did I talk too much?
No.
But did I trigger anything in your mind that you were not aware of before?
Yeah, I was just looking for something that I was reading the other day. Oh yeah, what is it? It says I just like say these little notes, these little things that I was reading. It says
go for it.
It says Gaudiya sannyasis are traditionally known as Tridandi Bhikshu, which literally means street beggar.
Okay.
And it says several ISKCON millionaire sannyasis even print this on their title letterheads.
They did?
Allegedly. I don't have the full article here because these are just my notes right here. I had a question actually about...
That's because, just one small comment, not a big dissertation. One little comment is that the actual sannyasi, street beggar, is not supposed to accumulate a bank account.
Right.
He's supposed to live at the mercy of those to whom he preaches. So go ahead.
No, I was going to ask about Narayan Maharaj. Like, I was reading some, like, outlandish stuff the other day where he was saying, like, I'm the real successor of Srila Prabhupada.
Well, that's a step down, because in his book that he wrote, Priyabandhu, Shiksha Guru Priyabandhu, he said that he considered himself an equal to Prabhupada because he and Prabhupada used to sit on the same level of seat cushion, even though he is Prabhupada's god nephew. And he said he used to treat his own Diksha Guru like an equal also. But then the title of the book itself is a great offense. Because Shiksha Guru Priya Bandhu. Priya Bandhu means best friend, right?
Okay.
That's Narayan Maharaj's whole thing. Shiksha Guru, Prabhupada said, the Shiksha Guru and the Diksha Guru must be on the same platform. If one is not on the same platform as the other, meaning liberated, pure devotee platform, then one or both of them is a rascal. So Narayan Maharaj started out by being a rascal, very offensive rascal. Then there was some disruption in the ashram, and he went to Sevakunj. He went to become a Babaji, study from a Babaji, Rasika. What is Rasika? Intimate pastimes of Radha and Krishna. That is forbidden in our disciplic line. We have Narayan Maharaj, and we have Prabhupada's, Bhaktisiddhanta's brother. Oh my God, where was he? Was in Birnagar. He studied Rasika, and he made himself unqualified to associate with devotees because it's offense to Rasika. So Narayan went to study Rasika. His guru, when the disturbance ended, his guru came back, Keshava Maharaj came back and dragged him by the ear back to the ashram and said, never ever go back there again. And he obeyed his guru. He never went back there again until his guru passed away in late 1968, in which case he zoomed back there and resumed his study of Sahajya Rasika. So then he has continuously committed offenses against Prabhupada. And on top of it, I am convinced that he was the genius behind Tamal Krishna poisoning Prabhupada. Because Tamal had already been saying with Shamasundar and others that Prabhupada was senile and that he wasn't able to do things practically in a very effective way. So Tamal gave back the Bombay land to Mr. Nair, who I knew quite well. And then Prabhupada had to pay another 10 lakhs of rupees to get the land back again. So saying that it's senile, if Narayan Maharaj heard Tamal saying the Prabhupada was senile, he said, you have to do something about it. This is not a fact. I don't know this for a fact, conjecture. But in my opinion, based on the way things shook out over the time frame, very likely that Narayan Maharaj said you have to do something about him before he makes a fool of himself through senility, is sitting up there drooling and unable to give class.
Oh.
And when Prabhupada actually in his last breaths was translating the Shastra, right?
Yeah.
And his kidneys had failed. His kidneys had failed and stopped functioning 1 month before that. So in terms of being senile, he is about as unsenile as a human being can be, as a living jiva can be in a body, pure body of a pure devotee. Yes, so you're getting the point there strongly.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I think that Narayan Maharaj convinced Tamal that there was only one way to keep Prabhupada from destroying his own movement, and that was by letting him go back to Godhead quickly as possible, by any means possible. And that's why Narayan Maharaj, who avoided Prabhupada during the entire, I met Narayan Maharaj in 1971 in Vrindavan, and he was speaking in Bengali, but Prabhupada's disciples were there, and he was striding around talking. You know, I didn't make much of it. I wasn't impressed by him by any means. I wasn't overwhelmed. I just said, oh my God, another Prabhupada. This must be another Prabhupada. No, he just seemed like another Bengali, another Indian guy in Vrindavan talking, you know, just a normal Indian talking in Vrindavan. So he avoided Prabhupada. He avoided Prabhupada over the years until the end when Prabhupada was somehow mysteriously slipping into intense illness.
Yeah.
In this case, Narayan Maharaj began to hang out there on the invitation of none other than Tamal.
Right.
So after when Prabhupada began to get more and more into his last days, Narayan Maharaj was called, Prabhupada called for Narayan Maharaj. Narayan Maharaj zoomed. He was in the middle of performing an artik at his temple, and he zoomed over to see Prabhupada from Mathura to Vrindavan. He zoomed over, and what happened was he came right into Prabhupada's room. He said, yes, you called for me? You called for me? Assuming you know what? That Prabhupada was at his last breaths. He was bringing Narayan Maharaj to say, Narayan Maharaj, none of my disciples are on your level. It is you who I would like to see succeed me. Yes.
Wow.
So he was there just drooling, you can imagine. Quit in the middle of artik. Why didn't he finish the artik? No, he had to immediately go in case somebody else showed up first. And so he said, yes. And Prabhupada said, my God brothers, I have offended them so many times. Are any of my God brothers in Vrindavan or Mathura? I would like to see them and have them come and see me so I can apologize. Prabhupada was playing him like a sucker. And Narayan, oh, no. Most of them are gone, and most of them are very busy. I don't know if they can come now, because Narayan was afraid that Prabhupada was going to name somebody else to be a successor.
Right. Keep the threat.
So Narayan just went into a panic state. No. Prabhupada kept on oozing him along. He said, that I have some problems in Mayapur. There are some things they're not doing quite right. Oh no, Prabhupada, you have taught them so nicely, Swamiji, or whatever you call Prabhupada, Swami. You've taught them so nicely that they're doing excellently. You've taught them very well. Any problems, they will solve them perfectly. And then Prabhupada brought up something else in Vrindavan. No, it's very nice, He didn't call it Prabhupada, but anyway, he just kept on doing the same thing. So finally, in the whole end of it, Narayan Maharaj had to finish the artik that he was doing, and Prabhupada never asked him anything except, oh yes, we have so much money in America. We're dangling the keys of the Cadillac in front of Narayan Maharaj's nose. We have so many temples, so much money. I'm worried that my disciples may not be able to handle it properly. He said, well, I can help as much as I can. I will do whatever you want me to do. I can give them guidance. He didn't say, I will become their servant. He said, I will become their guide. What sort of guide I wonder? Diksha guide, perhaps? Perhaps that's one close. But anyhow, that's what he was saying. This is all, first of all, in Bengali, then it was translated into English. And then, when the Narayan Maharaj disciples saw how Prabhupada was just leading Narayan around by the nose, they retranslated it to make it sound much different. But Narayan Maharaj, even Jodharani gave a lecture in Seattle where she said, oh yes, Narayan Maharaj, he's talking about Prabhupada's books. His books are so wonderful. Prabhupada did a wonderful thing translating these books and into English and whatnot. And then Narayan Maharaj says, but of course, they're not his books. They're written by Rupa Goswami, Jiva Goswami. But he put his own name on them. He named the book after himself. Oh, they're fancy books. They have nice binding. But in India, the same book, you can buy it in a rough cover, but it's the same book. but they have the actual author's name on it. So you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So and then he said, well, so he has done all of that, and it's very nice, but he just did that for himself. It wasn't for any good purpose because the books were already there, and he simply tried to take credit for having written them.
Wow.
That Jadharani, who used to be Shaimarani, used to be Jadharani, Prabhupada's one of his earliest disciples, was busy proposing that Narayan Maharaj was correct, even though she was one of the illustrators of all of Prabhupada's books, and actually painted the first paintings before Prabhupada had illustrated books of Lord Nisringadev and Krishna and whatnot at Matchless Gifts on 2nd Avenue. And she's busy giving a lecture about Narayan Maharaj in that regard. Can you imagine?
Wow. I also was reading too, where it was it's saying like he said that Prabhupada that he didn't start ISKCON, that like taking it back like the Gaudiya Math and everything, like and diminishing what Prabhupada did.
Who did? Who said that?
Narayana Maharaj.
He did. Well, Sridhar Maharaj said that too. In fact,
Oh
he
no,
said that.
you know what? Maybe you know what? I may be misspoken. It might have been Sridhar Maharaj because I was reading two things the other day. That's what it was. Sridhar Maharaj that said that Narayana Maharaj was the other thing with the sannyasi.
Yes. So Sridhar Maharaj was always telling everyone, "Oh, Prabhupada is like my Shiksha disciple."
Yeah, you're right. Okay, Haribo.
And he went to America. So actually, all these devotees are mine. All of his disciples are my disciples. In 1974, I was in Mayapur. I did the first Mayapur festival in 71. Came back in 74, again with my wife, the same one that went with me to see Fukushima. And then we went to Navadvip. He invited us all to Navadvip. In retrospect, it reminded me of the story of Aghasura, where the coward boys walked into the mouth of the serpent, not realizing that Krishna had not walked in with them.
Right.
So we all went there. He served terrible pandal. It was all burlap and tatters. And he had a few followers, and they looked at us funny in the eye and grabbed our hands and jumped up and down holding our hands. I thought, what's going on? Are they gay or what is their deal? What are they doing this for? And
what was it?
I'll tell you in a moment. It's part of the interesting story. And then he served incredibly bad food. You know, if you take potatoes and cook them in a big iron cauldron without using ghee, they're going to come out black and taste horrible. They did. They were black and they tasted horrible. So anyhow, then he gave a lecture in Bengali. And he lectured for hours. We were sitting there debating in the sun. About 300 of us, you know, in 74, much more than the first festival and second festival, several hundred. Did you ever see that Achyutananda's record with a bunch of devotees walking into Navadvip? And I'm on the cover, actually.
What's the album name?
Album, it has songs on it. Vaishnavacharya songs.
Maybe.
Anyhow, because nobody has a record player anymore. But the thing is
I have like the album covers, and I have a lot of those albums like saved digitally.
Well, if you see one, it was Achyutananda's record, and he showed that image of like hundreds of devotees flooding into Navadvip to go to that occasion. And I'm standing there next to the same wife again that was there with Fukushima. And we walked in there and we spent hours and hours there, like 4 or 5, 6 hours there. And then we went back by boats, you know, boat taxis over to Mayapur. And it was a strange experience. Later on, the next day, the Krishnagar, which is the biggest town aside from Navadvip, right on the Bangladesh border, before it was Bangladesh, Pakistani border, East Pakistan border, uh, published a huge article featuring Sridhar Maharaj. Do you know about this?
No.
Yeah, well, now you will. This is, you will know the shame of the situation. That he published a huge article saying that Sridhar welcomes his hundreds of American disciples to his ashram, and that his followers, his disciples, fulfill the prediction of Bhaktivinoda Thakur that the Bengali devotees and the Western devotees will dance together, hand in hand, chanting Hari Bol, Hari Bol. So that is the explanation to your question.
Right. And you were just like out of nowhere, like.
Yeah, I said, what is this creep doing? Holding my hands and jumping up and down, saying Hari Bol, Hari Bol. deeply significant look in his eye that I couldn't fathom. It was sort of significant look that he started hitting up on me, maybe. I don't know what it is. What's that significant look about, you know? And maybe he was. But the thing is that, so they brought the newspaper to Srila Prabhupada the next day. Prabhupada read it with increasing rage. I was there, increasing rage as he read through the whole huge article. I mean, this is big news for a little place like Krishnagar. He read through it and how these are actually Sridhar's disciples from America and Europe who have come to offer him darshan. Not one word mentions Prabhupada in that entire article. That's when it began to occur to me, wait a minute, everyone was invited to Sridhar's except Srila Prabhupada. He was all by himself in Mayapur.
That's crazy.
Well, not if you're Sridhar, it's not crazy.
No, I know, but wow. It's
interesting.
Like
yeah, so he said that. So Srila Prabhupada was in such a rage, and he said, under no circumstance should any of my disciples ever go to visit Sridhar ever again. He was very strict on that. Actually,
didn't he? It's like when they were asking before he went to Samadhi, did he tell them to go to Sridhar Maharaj, or is that?
He told the gurus to go to Sridhar Maharaj.
Right, because Tamal he was associated quite a bit for a little while, wasn't he?
Not that much, but the reason that he asked them, that's on a whole other dimension of
right. Yeah.
Sorry. Because Prabhupada knew the Ritviks were going to declare themselves gurus. He sent them to Sridhar because Sridhar had destroyed the Gaudiya Math by appointing an Acharya, Ananta Vasudev, which Ramachandra and I went over the other night, where Prabhupada calls Ananta Vasudev the jackal Ananta Vasudev, because he destroyed the Gaudiya Math. He was a homosexual himself. His wife committed suicide because her son was going to tell his father, Ananta Vasudev, that his mother was having an affair with someone. The mother killed her son, to keep that from coming to her husband's attention, who was a homosexual. And then she committed suicide. And then after that, Ananta Vasudev committed suicide. And that was created by Sridhar.
Wow.
Sridhar had appointed him. So if anyone who knows the history, at the time, if they'd known, what a bitter thing for Prabhupada to do. He sent his 11 murderous, poisoning him, rascal, so-called Ritviks to Navadvip how to become regular gurus. From the man that destroyed the Gaudiya Math by creating an Acharya, which was forbidden by Bhaktisiddhanta. Mm-hmm. Hey, how do you like that one? So anyhow, there, then in that same meeting, when Prabhupada said never go see Sridhar, a person came over from Navadvip, very humbly, that, hunched over, offered obeisance to Prabhupada with a paper in his hand. And he brought it up and gave it to Srila Prabhupada. Can you imagine probably the most insulting, least appropriate thing, or within context, that person had on the paper that he brought?
Yeah.
What was it?
What's that?
What was on the what was written on the paper that he brought over from Sridhar?
What wasn't written on the paper was what it was.
I'm asking you, dude. What's your guess? What was written on the paper that he brought over from Sridhar?
That Prabhupada got from
Yeah.
Sridhar?
Okay, let's get it straight. A servant came from Sridhar's ashram by boat, came over to Navadvip, to Mayapur, walked all the way down a mile or two or wherever it is, down to where Prabhupada was in his cottage, in the grass cottage, and handed him, or actually it was, I think, on the Pongal, because it was during the Rath Yatra, during the Mayapur festival, handed him a paper from Sridhar. What was written on the paper? I mean, he's already claimed to be, these are his disciples. He's already claimed they came all the way from Europe and just to see him. Prabhupada is not mentioned. So adding insult to injury, what would you add as insult to injury in this case on that paper?
He's the successor?
No, nothing that stupid.
Okay.
Not you're not stupid, but I'm just saying it was.
No, I know. I'm trying to think outside the box here. I'm not sure.
You wouldn't guess. No one will guess. Does anyone guess? It was an invoice for all the cost of the food and cost of the pandal and everything that they set up in Navadvip.
That's what record labels do to people.
Isn't that?
They buy you cars and then they take it out of the album sales.
Is that an apparat? No, it's not an apparat. What is it? It's an apparat on steroids. A big apparat. Now, to just add a little tidbit to this, in 1968, early 68, before I was initiated, I'd been associating with a Bengali guy named Ashok Fakir in San Francisco. And because I was a hippie, we were smoking pot and whatnot, and Ashok Fakir's sacrament was pot. And I used to give him dark China of a kilo or so of pot for the holy ceremonies that he held there, with a human skull in the middle and worshiping Ramakrishna. I mean, I didn't know anything, just that he seemed like the right guru for hippies, right? So my first Rath Yatra that I went to was 1968, shortly before I joined the movement and took initiation from Prabhupada. So I went to Rath Yatra, and with Ashok Fakir and his group called the Bowels of Bengal, B-A-U-L-S, although Bowels, B-O-W-E-L-S would have served as well. But anyhow, the Bowels of Bengal, they are descended from the Ramakrishna line and somehow connected with a rejected line of maybe what you read about from Lord Nityananda's line, and Malik's, no doubt, and whatever they were, they came there with him because Albert Grossman, who was Bob Dylan's and Allen Ginsberg's manager, produced their records and books and whatnot. Allen Ginsberg said to him, bring this guy Ashok. He lived with him in Calcutta. Bring this guy Ashok, he'll make a sensation. He'll create a whole thing, because Allen Ginsberg created the hippie movement based upon his visit to Ashok in Calcutta. People was walking around with beads and incense and marks all over their bodies and chanting real mantras and all that, and smoking chillums and pipes with clay pipes with pot in them. He created the hippie movement based on that one few months visit with Ashok Fakir. So he said, you've got to bring this guy. He'll be a sensation. He thought he'll make Allen Ginsberg a sensation because the guy will become the guru of all the hippies. He came, but Grossman couldn't make a record with the balls. And Ashok, even though they chanted and danced very nicely, it didn't sell. So he dropped it. So the balls went back to India. But before they went back, some of them remained for Rath Yatra 1968. And that was the first Rath Yatra I went to. The first Rath Yatra that there was 67. Shyamasunder built it on the back of a truck with the deities facing sideways and backwards. You know, Krishna, Bala, Subhadra, Balaram facing different directions. He was like that. And so he didn't know. So in 68, he built a Rath Yatra car that was modeled after one that I saw in Bhubaneswar for Goddess Kali. So, you know, that's Shyamasunder again. So I'm following the Rath Yatra car, staggering along. I have a big beard and long hair and a kaftan. And I'm walking along behind the Rath Yatra car. I'm quite amazed by the whole thing. It's just amazing. And I'm with Ashok, and we're all chanting Hare Krishna together. Ashok and Sarabhit, he's from Calcutta, of course. And so we got there. And then the festival went on. I was listening to the Mridanga beats of the Baals, which was very intricate, very excellent Mridanga beats, which I don't observe because I only use Prabhupada's Mridanga beats, and only Prabhupada's melodies. So they were chanting, and it was all very nice. But I wasn't a Prabhupada disciple. And Ashok was dancing in front of the Rath Yatra car. He was very gorgeous. He looked like a Bengali carving of Gornitai sort of carving, you know, round face, circles under his neck, you know, his fingers were bent backwards. He was very delightfully handsome looking and not at all lusty looking. He looked like he was imitating Lord Chaitanya, which of course is what he was doing. And he was dancing along there and whatnot. The next day, we all had a good time. We had a good time with him. The next day, the San Francisco Chronicle came out with a front page picture of the Rath Yatra cars, with Ashok Fakir dancing in front of it. And it's and the Baals are there. And we're there. I don't think I'm in the picture of it. And he was there. And its headline, Ashok invites everyone to dance and chant with his Rath Yatra festival. My brother and I, you know, my mother's side of the family were Puritans, and we were very puritanic, raised rather puritanically. And it goes back to the Mayflower, but they stayed pure. Once a Puritan, it's hard to get rid of that tendency. We became very outraged. And we went to see Ashok when the article said, Ashok, what is this? We went with you to celebrate the ISKCON, you know, the Hare Krishna's festival. And you say it's your festival? Ashok started laughing. He said, yes, I'm from Bengal. In Bengal, we do that. Remember that Sridhar's Bengali also. That's what we do. We do like that. He said it's just like back and forth. We steal each other's fame and glory, but we can't. I said, we cannot tolerate. My brother and I were outraged. We cannot tolerate that. We had given him recording equipment and all sorts of stuff. And I didn't take the pot back, but I took back everything else. And we just took everything we gave him back. We went to leave him and said, we cannot. I was about to take initiation from Ashok. Said, I cannot be initiated by you. You are a crook, a criminal, a liar. And he was just laughing, saying, like we were children, didn't know what was really going on.
Right.
And so we left. And to leave, we bowed down in front of him, not for none of us, but bowed down obeisances. And he touched our heads with his hand, and bolts of electricity went through our heads because he had considerable Shakti.
Yeah.
I know a lot more about him. I'm going to tell you right now. But anyhow, and just shortly before he died in Vancouver, to Canada. But he was all wretched. He had a beautiful wife and beautiful children, little children. It was just amazing. So, and he was very nice. His wife was a wonderful cook. She was very beautiful also. Children were gorgeous. He was very nice. He had mystical power. I remember one time that there was a screech about to be a big automobile crash, right? And he took his hand and went up like that. But except his fingers bent backwards. It's not like my demoniac hand. And he went up like that. And the screech came to a sudden end. He turned and smiled at us and sat down.
Wow.
He'd stopped the crash. It was
Wow.
Shakti.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so anyhow, that's the end of that. So when I went to saw what Sridhar did, when I saw that article I couldn't read it, it was in Bengali, but when it was translated for me in front of Prabhupada, and Prabhupada, I don't know if he read it or somebody read it in Bengali and then translated to English, it was just the same experience that had happened 3 years before. I said, no. And at that point, basically, I cursed Sridhar because he had followed in that hideous pattern of Ashok Fakir, the Bengali habit of stealing other people's disciples if you can. Just for the moment, just so you get publicity and maybe some good money and maybe some women devotees with women followers. So anyhow, that's the story for sure. So I never went to see Sridhar again. Prabhupada said not to, I didn't. But everybody else did. Bunch of whores. So anyhow, male whores, I should say. Sannyasi whores. They did because they knew they would never become sannyasis or gurus with the 11 gurus there. So they wanted, after a while, it got old, they wanted to become part of the troop. So they went and took initiation from Sridhar so that they could. Cheap.
Who took initiation?
The ISKCON sannyasis.
Oh, you mean they took sannyas from him?
They took sannyas and they also, they were aiming to become gurus. And they had to become sannyasis first. And the 11 wouldn't let them become sannyasis. They wanted to be the sannyasis.
Ah.
Otherwise,
everybody jumping over the line.
Yeah. So it was just like a disgusting orgy of self-indulgence unrelated to Lord Chaitanya's mission and unrelated to Srila Prabhupada's teaching, unrelated to his direct instructions, unrelated to anything that he created for ISKCON.
Mixed modes. That's what that sounds like to me.
Well, mixed modes, yeah. Well, mixed with what? What's
I'm just saying, it's not Satvaguna.
If it's mixed modes, tell me then. Maybe you can educate me on this. What's lower than Tamaguna? Tell me.
Oh, I don't know. Nothing.
Okay, how can it be a mixed mode?
Hare Krishna. You're okay. Thank you, Prabhupada.
Mixed modes means it must be lower than.
Mixed modes would be good.
It's not above. It's not above Tamaguna. So if it's not above Tamaguna.
You got me the last time when we were talking too, because I wasn't thinking the way you were thinking. I was like way over there. I was like, that's what the broomstick is for.
Yeah. Well, but don't mind. It's not me doing this. It's just me praying to Krishna, Paramatma, make me dance like a puppet. When I said that stuff, I'm just as surprised as you are.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, it's a fact. You can do it too. In fact, I want everyone in our gang, I want everyone to become doing that, transparently delivering what Krishna was delivered, not what I've studied in the class and then first in Karmi class and now in college class and now in ISKCON class and now in my own readings to become better than my godbrother class. No, let's just go for the straight thing. From jiva to jiva, by Paramatma guiding from jiva to jiva. That's much more fun, much more pleasurable. And it has the interesting fact of not being mixed modes because it's real.
Jai, wow. 3 hours and 29 seconds.
Okay,
Really?
I'm sure we have done enough for tonight. Are we okay? Satisfied? I'm sorry, I promised to give you not a big long dissertation, then I did again. So Prabhu, can you, and in the future, can you ask me questions and try to keep me from giving a dissertation on it? So you can ask more questions.
Guy,
Is that okay?
that's fine. I think sometimes it helps to get the background when you go along. It makes it more interesting and nice.
Well, there's nothing I've told you that isn't superbly good for you to hear. I'm not saying that myself because I'm not the brains behind this. It's superbly perfect for you to hear because you'll hear it from no one else anywhere, anyhow. Because people are stuck with this God over the years, learn to blind themselves to everything the Prabhupada said.
Right.
And I didn't do that. So that gives me a small edge over my exalted God brothers.
Jai.
So in finishing, let me just say one thing about ISKCON. I am completely satisfied that Prabhupada was 100% successful with ISKCON. Because I'm not talking about gurus, I'm not talking about GBC, I'm talking about the fact that there are temples, there's deity worship, there's prasadam offered and served, there's books being distributed, change books, but nonetheless, the real ones are still there somewhere, it can be reprinted. And all of this stuff is going on just as though Prabhupada were personally present. What is not good is the fact that it can't make advancement. It's a very nice Kanista auditory arrangement. If you know the conversation between Ramananda Roy and Lord Chaitanya, Lord Chaitanya asked for some enlightenment, and Ramananda Roy mentioned the Aniyabalasa Bij, which is the social, it's really the Kanista Adhikari platform. Aniyabalasa Bij is social spiritual life. And then the next level was the Jnana Karma Bij, which means the Jnana Karma Bij is the, karma means material advancement using Vedic means, Shastra and Brahminical participation. And Jnana means becoming a Mayavadi. In other words, reading the scriptures, like the devotee went to the aspiring neophyte went to the Vedanta Sutra, and he asked the Vedanta Sutra, it happens to be a book, he's asked the Vedanta Sutra, for what is it that I am searching? And the Vedanta Sutra, although just a book, resonated out of the heavens, a huge voice saying, Tat Vamasi, Tat Vamasi, Tat Vamasi, which means thou art that. So that's the Jnana Karma. The Jnana means Tattvamasi. You want to find yourself by reading the Vedanta Sutra. But so Lord Chaitanya was disgusted, practically broke off his friendship from Ramananda Roy until he asked Ramananda Roy if he could do one more. And Ramananda Roy was sweating bullets and saying, all the bullets hadn't been invented yet, but said, yes, the Bhakti Lata Bij, and he started describing the glories of the devotional creeper that comes up to Krishna's lotus feet. And so that is the process by which one becomes the Madhya Madhikari, and then when it comes up to Krishna's lotus feet, leaves are sprouting out, of course, all along the way, and then branches, flowers, and then fruits at the top, at Krishna's lotus feet. Lord Chaitanya became mad with ecstasy and was dancing in ecstasy, embracing Ramananda Roy, and said to Ramananda Roy, how you have given me such pleasure with what you have said. I cannot have such a taste from anyone else. And Ramananda Roy looked at him with his eyes bulging out and blurted out, but my dear Lord, I didn't know any of that stuff. I didn't know any of it. You were channeling it through me. I didn't know that. It was you, not me. And Lord Chaitanya said, incidentally true, but the fact is it came through your mouth, your lips, and because of that, it gave me such pleasure because I could not have said those words the way you said them. That is the nature of the Bhakti Lata Beach. So that is our goal, Bhakti Lata Beach. And our Krishna consciousness movement will be based on Bhakti Lata Beach. The ISKCON gurus are Kanista Adhikaris. You can't get further. It says not to try, not to take the guru, but to find the Uttamadhikari guru. There's only one Uttamadhikari guru for the next 10,000 years, as far as I can see, and that is Srila Prabhupada. And the time gap means nothing. Living guru. Someone asked me once about my not having a living. I said, it's fine that you were initiated by Prabhupada, but I need a living guru. And I said to that person, well, that's what you say, but I will tell you that my dead guru is far more alive than your living guru will ever be. So you see, so that's the Bhakti Lata Beach, and we need to consider that the guru, last thing I will try to say, the last thing I want to say, coming from Thakur Bhaktivinoda, which was, he reasons ill who say Vaishnavas die, when thou art living still and sound. Vaishnavas die to live, and living spread the holy life around. Whoever came up with that living guru idea had evidently rejected the teachings of Thakur Bhaktivinoda. Because as far as I know, perhaps you can correct me if I'm mistaken, I think Thakur Bhaktivinoda was speaking of his own guru who lived hundreds of years before he did. So Prabhupada can be the guru for the next 10,000 years. He will be a perfectly nice, decent, wonderful, good, acceptable, flawless, nice, good, charming, acceptable guru for the next 10,000 years.
Right.
And if anyone has a different view on the topic, I would like them to show me who they can pull out of a hat like a rabbit that's better than a nice, charming, kind guru like Prabhupada for the next 10,000 years. Show me. I'd like to see that guru. Jai Pataka, maybe? Okay, keep on going. The only good thing Jai Pataka did was initiate Madhu Pandit.
That's a good one. Only thing he could. Good thing he did.
Yeah, otherwise I heard him so offensive to Prabhupada, it's indescribable. Before he was a sannyasi. Yeah, very offensive. He was so insulting to Prabhupada. Oh, spoke down to him insultingly. Simply because he was the Calcutta temple president. He thought he could do that. Anyhow, Hare Krishna Prabhus, are we complete?
Yes, we are. Hare Krishna.
I hope everyone here will stay with me for 10,000 years on planet Earth during the golden age of Kali to deliver the fallen conditioned souls. We'll have so much fun. It will be as though we were with Lord Chaitanya and his associates chanting and taking prasadam and going mad with ecstasy, chanting the holy name. Not like today or yesterday or tomorrow, but like the next 10,000 years. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.